here.
I'm afraid my palate's probably
live.
not quite as refined as yours, but I will still.
Hey, welcome to the other podcast. This week is brought to you by
Dalmore
Sherry
Cask Select
Sherry Cask Select
12 year
in my mouth. Thank you very much, Corey Coffin,
yes
for joining us today.
uh
AKA a long time ago, miles away, Bubba. And he's finally here. And again, this is the other podcast. Welcome to the show. My name is Andre.
I am Pat.
and I am Bubba, or Corey Coffin, formerly known as Bubba.
See, even you do it. So what we're going to do now is we just had a brief huddle before we started going here, and we've got to be able to see our show notes and be able to talk at the same time. There was a little bit of a concern of not being able to see ourselves. We're all very narcissistic. So we're going to go ahead and switch over. And so if we go off screen or something, that's fine. Now we can't see ourselves.
So if it goes blank, we'll have no idea
Exactly.
what you're talking for.
Exactly.
I mean, this technically was started as a podcast, so I don't think the video is necessarily.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And we can also see there's a little record button on the live streaming.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now that I have gone away from the actual script here, I'm going to just jump right into it again. We've introduced the show. This is the other podcast. What is this show? Well, again, it is just having a conversation with people who want to have conversations with us. Me and Pat, usually. If Pat's not available, I'll talk to somebody else. And we've got our first guest in-house. That's not me and Pat. Well, me and Pat are here.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And you should feel pretty honored because Andre and I were talking last week. The bat dance has been a recurring theme of our show until we were considering trying to get Prince or maybe getting a medium who could connect us with Prince. And we ended up going with you instead. So to all our many listeners, Prince, you never know. Tune in next week. We may have Prince with us.
And if you are a medium who can get in touch with Prince,
yes,
contact.
I would love.
Contact us about contacting Prince
because it would be absolutely fascinating to hear Prince's take on the Batman soundtrack and Bat Dance in particular. Like, I would like, was he really proud of that? Like, was that his finest work, or some of his finest work, or was that something he wasn't? I mean, it'd be really.
Well, I'm wondering if there's interviews now.
There could be. We again, we don't do any research, so
yeah.
If we do have Prince on, I do think we need to have your mom come on because I remember that your mom was a big fan of Prince. She found him very attractive, and so I think we'd have to.
Yes, as far as I remember. Well, I don't know. She did find him attractive, I think.
I swear we had conversations.
I learned what the word androgynous meant because of Prince, because my mom was talking about how attractive he was and that he was androgynous, and I had to.
Oh, he was a beautiful man.
No, yeah,
absolutely.
We mean you heard? You've never seen Prince?
Seen Prince.
Okay. Well, I thought you said I heard he was a beautiful man.
Oh no. It was a statement of fact.
Oh, okay.
He was a beautiful man.
He was. There was no way I heard about it. And you are the history buff. You said that as we came in. So you maybe tell us, what were his interviews about Bat Dance like?
I unfortunately haven't captured much of that. The closest thing that I've seen recently about Prince mostly has to deal with his guest spot on New Girl and how he was so against the Kardashians being on that episode.
Oh.
He actually reached out to the producers of the show and said, I want to be on your show. I will come in and do a guest spot. And they were like, oh, we'll get the Kardashians. No, you won't. They're not going to be there.
Wow.
Yeah.
You really came through in the clutch there.
I did.
Thank you.
Yeah. And speaking of sexy men, of course, so we should probably hear a little bit about Corey and
yes.
Yeah. Yes. I am Corey now. I believe I buried Bubba somewhere in my backyard. I am married to my amazing partner in crime, and I refer to that as her as my partner in crime to literally everybody, Paula. We just had our 4-year anniversary. We have a large blended family, 6 kids. Youngest is 6, oldest is 24. 4 of them still at home. And I guess the legend of Bubba is rather immense, but like I said, he's buried. He doesn't exist anymore, at least on paper.
The legend of Bubba was the greatest introduction to a person I've ever had, because Pat and I were in the same, I think it was the English class, and you were in that English class, but we never saw you much. But it was prior to us knowing about Beta at all, Beta Theta Pi, the fraternity we're all in. Not all of you, all of us here. And the fraternity colors are delicate shades of pink and blue. So if you don't have any like connection with that at first, and you're thinking of fraternities, you're like, oh, pink and blue. So I saw your hat all the time, and we talked about it. Like, is it pink and blue? And I was like, well, it's just got to be faded.
Yeah, we
like
thought it was faded out.
He's been out in the sun a lot.
Yeah, it's not gonna be like red and blue. It's probably not pink and blue, but it was. And then you had a relationship with one of our friends that we lived with in the same dorm, and she would talk about you as Bubba. And actually, at the time, I don't think we knew you were Bubba. We just knew Corey Coffin was the.
Yes, because yes, that is accurate.
Yeah, and then we found out it was Bubba, and then
we eventually put those
two
together.
and two together.
That was Canadian literature, I believe.
Yes.
Not English. Yeah.
The Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz.
I never watched the movie. Did you watch the movie?
I didn't watch the movie.
Isn't that like?
But I remember fully committing to that book and being like, this is I got to the end and I'm like, wait, what? This just ended? Like, there's 2 more chapters that get like, did my book get ripped?
I have zero recollection of that book.
I remember the book. I remember reading it,
and I actually did all my schoolwork
Yes.
and went to all my classes, and I have zero
I didn't.
recollection. Yeah,
I did not either.
I know that's kind of.
What was the name of the other book? No, there's a Noah's Ark one. It was this family's messed up. Basically,
Honestly, I couldn't tell you a single thing we read in that class. I can picture the professor, the guy that taught it, because he was kind of.
He was interesting.
Yeah,
he was interesting.
All those professors were for English.
Yeah, it kind of goes along with the territory, right?
That was a good class. Anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. So nowadays I work in insurance. I am a senior claims manager at Liberty Mutual. I don't know if I can say that, but I am wearing one of their shirts right now, so that kind of gives it away.
And you just did, and this is live, so
it's out there. I handle the worst of the worst type of insurance claims. I don't handle them. I'm a manager. I have employees that do this, and I spend way too much time talking to attorneys all day long. And
how do you like that role as compared to we used to work together?
Yep.
You were my boss. And
who are we kidding? They just did what you wanted, showed up.
One of my
I think
favorite.
that's what he still does.
Yeah.
We've talked about his job. I still have no idea. My family's constantly, so what does Andre do again? And I'm like, I honestly cannot tell you what Andre does. So.
Look at my LinkedIn profile. That's all there. One of my favorite memories of you being my boss at that job was, there was the misogyny thing. That was not one of my favorite memories, but there was the memory of we worked in arbitration together, like writing arguments when people had, if you get in a car accident, the 2 insurance companies would say who's at fault, and it was our job to look at Google Maps, draw pictures of the accident, look at
Basically,
interviews.
we were cheap attorneys.
Yes. It was fun. It was probably one of my favorite jobs, just doing that part of the work. But we had gotten backed up or something. Or no, we had like loads that we had to do. We had like specific amounts that we had to do. And it turned into this big thing. And you were like, all right, we got to do. It was like this weird layout. And I had said, why don't we just front load all the work? If you do it all on Monday, then you don't have anything to do for the rest of the week, because it made sense. And you were not happy with that and called me out on it in front of everybody. Why don't you just do the work? I had a smart way of doing things. All right. He did not appreciate that, but I understand.
So was Andre a good employee?
The best. Oh, you were asking him?
Andre was a great employee. I mean, he actually got tasked with a really crappy job at the end with that whole basically manual that you put together.
That was when misogyny came into play.
And it was a huge document. I think all combined, it was something like 2,600 pages worth of information.
Wow.
And he organized it, and I was constantly going back to him like for different things about, okay, so in Excel, how do I do this? In Excel, how do I do this? And now I'm the guy that everybody comes to and goes, okay, in Excel, how do you do this? So I'm constantly thinking about you in that sense. But no, he was a great employee. That period of time, it was fun. I really didn't have a lot of stress as a manager. I mean, I had 20 plus employees. But by and large, the hardest part about that job was that we'd have business needs shift where we'd lose business as a company and I'd have to lay off a bunch of people. And then we'd get a new customer and I'd have to hire a bunch of new people and train them in like record time. Mm-hmm. So it was a lot of that ebb and flow that was problematic. But overall, I mean, we had a good time. I mean, we had Crazy Matt, who I think last I heard, he's in Michigan. Yeah, living with his sister. No, he's from Maine. He was actually from Poland, I think.
Oh, he just sported the Michigan stuff because of his sister.
His sister and her wife lived out there in the Upper PI, and is that what you say, Upper Peninsula? I'm not that familiar with Michigan. No, not the mitten. The other part. So he moved out there. And I guess CCS is all. Were you there when Heather was there?
I like this part of the podcast when we talk about all the people you guys used to work with.
She actually took over for, you remember Brigitte?
Yes.
Brigitte left, and now she runs the entire, like, that side of the house.
Heather does. Oh, that's cool.
So.
I just had a conversation. So we had to write arguments and like whatever. I just had it brought up the other day. One of the people who worked with us who was very verbose and used to use like the biggest, most who uses this word in an argument about something, but I specifically remember 2 horror stories. One horror story was when he was writing something and had to talk about horses and used equestrian in it, which was completely unnecessary in it to use equestrian, but he was the type of person that would do that. And the other horror story was I had to look up photos of a horse and a person, and I had to Google image that search, and I was like, wait a minute, before I do this, I need to let somebody know that this is for legitimate purposes, and I may find things I don't want to see.
Yeah.
It was okay. But
CCS was fun. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but it was where we worked. And, definitely. But I kept losing all my employees to Liberty Mutual, which was up the road, and they paid a lot more. So I always used to joke that we were kind of like the undergrad program, and everybody went to the graduate program at Liberty, and then I went there. So, it's the job itself is stressful. I mean, essentially, all I'm doing most of the time is reading case law, reading policy contracts, reading, complaints that are filed with whether it be an appellate court or a federal court or whatnot, and making determination as to our strategy. So it's, and I've determined that all of insurance and civil law is just extortion. That's all it is. Yeah. It's extortion. Yeah, there's no reason why we should pay it, but we have to because it's going to cost 6 times as much to defend it when we go and hire an attorney who's going to charge us $500,000 to defend a case. So,
So like most things in our country or the world in general, it's all like broken and corrupt and everything else.
Oh, and it's only one of the things that I struggled with, and the reason why I was a few minutes late tonight was my therapy went over. And I'm saying this on camera. Therapy is awesome. Get a therapist, use him or her. It's well worth it. But given my job and given the propensity for the types of claims I manage, whether they be sex abuse or sexual assaults, the things that I have to deal with, I have a therapist, and it's part of really handling the stress and anxiety because I'm a prepper by nature. My basement is stocked to capacity. I could live for 9, 12 months off the grid, no problem. Like, that's my mentality. And it's because of all the things that the reports I get to read, the scientific data that I get to see, it's stressful because it's managing that nagging sense of, well, this is going to happen next, and hope that somewhere there's technology or something that changes that outcome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like any job like that, where you take it home with you. Like when I worked at CCS, and all I did was read car accidents. Our news report, I just read police reports and wrote about car accidents. Then I drove home for 45 minutes on the turnpike and during rush hour traffic, and it was awful every time. But yeah, like what kind of stuff do you take home with you?
Now it's much easier. I take home a lot of schoolwork and a lot of planning and that sort of thing. And, one of the things that's hard with teaching is it's a job that's, you teach one day and then you've got to be ready to go the next day. And it's like you're performing. Sorry, weird noise. So assuming we're still recording, it's like you're on stage and performing. So like you have to be ready. It's not something where you can be like, oh, I can set that aside and, I'll get to it tomorrow and, whatever. It's like, you've got to be ready. So I have that kind of stress now, but that's not that bad. When I was an administrator, I was bringing home a lot of stress with me. And so, you talked about going to therapy. Like I was going to therapy during that time. That was a really hard time in my life. And, I think some people are really good at compartmentalizing those things. You could leave it at school, and I couldn't do that. One of my biggest things that was really hard for me was not being able to solve all the problems that people were having. That's because, there's so many issues with education. We don't need to get into all that, but I couldn't solve all of that. I could say to people, that's a legit issue. I don't have an easy solution for you. And, we would, I tried to make it as best I could, but I couldn't solve all those problems. And so that was really hard for me. And just, somebody who has issues with my own anxiety and stuff anyway, having a job that was, I didn't know what crisis thing I was going to be managing from moment to moment in that job. And so that kind of got at me a little bit too. And then there's, some other issues, but that was, that's what I had a hard time with. And so, yeah, I agree with you. Mental health and getting that in the right place is really, really important, whether it's through, medication or exercise or seeing a therapist, all those things I found really helpful in dealing with it. So, yeah.
Well, I was going to say, I first of all, Paula's teacher, and she's been very lucky because she's chosen a very different path. She went the homeschooling path, so she's been able to offer up classes independently of any type of school district or any type. I mean, the flip side is she's then responsible for funding it, all the materials and everything else, but she has a lot more freedom to do what she wants. And, but in your situation, I don't know how you manage the different personalities, especially the personalities of children. I am blown away. It's one of those things that I just bow down to teachers because I looked at going down that path. I looked at becoming a teacher. It was something, it was a major for a few semesters. And I couldn't even begin to comprehend the struggles. I mean, in my 21-year-old brain, what I was going to be faced with. And here you are doing on a daily basis. So I don't know how you're able to manage that.
Yeah. And I don't want to get into the whole thing on education and everything. But I don't think people really realize how poor the state of education is. Just education's not in a good place right now. Our schools are not in a good place. Our kids are not in a good place. And I love my school. I think our teachers work really hard. Our district works really hard. But we're dealing with so many, and this is even pre-COVID,
Yeah.
mental health issues with kids and some significant behavioral issues with kids, which all stem from like trauma and things like that. But like, there's just a lot, and the schools are being asked to do so much trying to deal with that. I mean, it's a really difficult profession right now, and you know, the labor shortage that everybody's experiencing is really bad in education as well. And so you've got teachers that are picking, you know, having huge class sizes, picking up other classes. For us, it's not getting the, you know, we have kids that are supposed to have all these supports in place, and there's nobody to, you know, we have at least 7 staff members right now that we're short, not to mention people are out. So it's a crazy job. I was reading when I got home today how all these crazy stories around the country of schools and how they're so short. And they're saying that there's been like a 30% drop in education majors in school in the last few years and stuff. So like, we're going to run out of teachers. But I mean, a lot of places are struggling with those same kind of.
Well, like with that labor shortage thing. So I went down to McDonald's yesterday, and it worked out because I shouldn't have gotten anything from McDonald's, but I couldn't get anything from McDonald's because, I mean, this was at 12:30, 1 o'clock, and the sign on the door says, due to staffing issues, the lobby is closed, just use the drive-through, and blah, blah, blah. And so I was thinking about that, how there's like all of this shortage, even in those jobs, going through like every place you look at. And then today I was kind of wondering, well, is it that people are, you know, opting to try to get jobs, you know, better, I don't want to say better jobs, but like different jobs and different careers. You know, maybe they used to work at McDonald's, and they've decided, oh, this is an opportunity to get out of that fast food industry and educate myself and go on to other things. Maybe be a teacher, maybe not. But I wonder if that was kind of potentially a path that people are going to. I'd be interested to see like what kind of numbers and stuff for people actually going to school and stuff. You hear about like the unemployment rate and jobs, you know, that going down or going up in some areas. You know, what does that education rate look like, or what's that enrollment rate?
Well, the jobs report, from what I understand, we're continuing to, that just came out last week or the week before, and it was one of the driving reasons behind the Fed having again continue to be aggressive with rate hikes, because the jobs report was very positive. Unemployment's low. It's just a matter of labor shortages. And one thing that I recommend everybody go do is that there's websites out there that you can actually look and what's the likelihood your job will be replaced by a bot or a machine to understand, you know, what is the viability of your chosen career. And hey, listen, I am the guy, and Pat, I want to make sure I say this as gently as possible, because I chose an English degree. I chose a poetry degree because it was something I enjoyed. Yeah. I mean, you all know I started as a mechanical engineer, and I was told that's what I was going to be because I liked math and science. Well, I also liked reading. I actually enjoyed that, and I enjoyed literature and storytelling, and poetry got me laid a lot. So, I was
going to say there were far more females.
Well, that's what it was. I always tell the story is I started in engineering. There were no girls. So I went to education where it was all girls, and then finally realized that was too much. So I went to English where it was a good 50-50 split.
I can't handle this load.
Yeah, too many.
That was not my experience. Throw that out there, but yes.
But honestly, I find that my writing degree, my experience has lended itself well to the career I chose. I spend most of my days writing legal briefs, writing coverage positions, letters that are, you know, it's a legal document. So I do think that my English, but truly outside of education and writer, which that's kind of the pie in the sky type of thing, there wasn't a in between there. It feels like there's only two off ramps from an English degree, and for a traditional career. So I I always joke that, I stumbled backwards into my career thanks to an alumnus of ours, actually, and an ex-girlfriend of mine quitting. So it's
Because you got hired?
No, she quit as the essentially the receptionist for Dick Hogan, who's the alumnus. And I had just walked out of the restaurant I was working at because I was done with that. And I said, listen, I feel bad because you hired her because of me. She quit on you. I'll cover your front desk until you find something and I find something. And 3 months later, he comes back and says, you're doing a pretty good job with this. And I'm like, well, you gave me an incentive. If I book 5 appointments, you give me an extra $50. Like, that's a good incentive for me, especially because I wasn't making anything. And he said, well, I'll get you licensed. And I got licensed and I got really good at, doing the insurance. And insurance made a lot of sense. It's a very if then that, it's a logical function. So it progressed into going and following agency and selling until I realized I didn't predict it, but I saw the writing on the wall and said, I'm getting out of selling insurance in 2007, just before the bubble burst, and went into claims arbitration, and managed to ride that storm out when everybody else was having trouble. I did very well, and it just continually progressed into bigger and better claims roles to where I'm at now. And it's all because I fell backwards into it. So there's many days where I wake up and I have that imposter syndrome where I'm like, I don't have a legal degree. I am in charge of all attorneys. Like that's I struggle with, because I'm usually on calls with people that have MBAs, they've got their JDs, they've got all these advanced letters, and it's like, well, I just have 20 years of experience. So that's it for me.
And you don't have to, tiptoe around that, because I got into English as a major because it was the path of least resistance. It was something I was good at. I really enjoyed reading. I especially enjoyed writing. And so that's kind of where, and I didn't know what else to do. So I'm like, I'll just do that. And it was easy. And I got to read books and write about them. That was it. And I actually like the business and technical side of that too. And I think if I wasn't in teaching, that's probably what I do. And I fell back into teaching because my sister was an English major who then became a teacher. And I was like, I guess I could always do that. And I had been, I'd worked in summer camps and stuff, but, so I kind of fell backwards into my job too. And, I also have that imposter syndrome feeling all the time too. So maybe that's for a similar reason, but, same thing. I wasn't as, my educational background wasn't in teaching. It's more what I've gained in experience along the way and that sort of thing. So anyway.
I certainly don't use I don't have an English degree, though I was an English major for a little while, because I started off as a physics major and got a 0.76 GPA in my first semester. And the writing was on the wall that I should not be a physics major.
I think if you had gone to class once in a while, maybe you could have done a little better. Maybe gotten up above a 1.
Yeah, probably. Probably. I did. I just recently, there was a woman who was going to be working with our company, not like for our company, but like with the subconsultant or something. And I was checking her out online, and she had something and mentioned she had like a 0.3 something GPA her first semester. And I was like, yes, somebody has
finally after
academic probation.
I should just like print that out, frame it, give it to my parents. Like, look, that wasn't the worst. But yeah, like I was always good at English in high school, and that's why I was like, all right, well, let's go to something that I know I can survive in at least. But yeah, I don't want to bring up CCS again. But when you were talking about it again,
can you go back to talking about people you used to work with that nobody knows?
I'm about
to now. Okay,
Joe at CCS. He left like right after I got there. He was Gretchen's husband or ex-husband.
Yes.
Joe, if you're out there and by any chance you're listening to this, you still have my book. I let you borrow it. I don't remember what book it is, but you have it. I just remembered.
We should do a whole episode on people that like took stuff from us that owe it to us, like charity still owes me my the Weezer Blue album.
Oh, that's a good
And that was a
album.
great album.
Yeah.
I know. She borrowed it for me in college and never gave it back.
That's ridiculous.
I know.
Charity.
Terrible.
Get that back to him.
It's terrible.
Where are you going to play it on, really, though?
That's true, and now I can just stream it anytime.
Yeah.
So, but still, it's the principle of the thing, right?
I actually have an apology because I have a book that I did not return. It was a cook that I worked with at the Chocolate Grill when I was working there. He lent me a book, and it's one of my favorite books. My Name is Asher Lev. And it's
I just want to be clear. I just said like I've read it. No, I haven't.
It's by and my apologies to anybody who speaks Hebrew and knows the proper pronunciation, but I believe it's Chaim Potok. He wrote The Gift.
Oh, the author.
The author, yeah. He wrote The Gift. My Name is Asher Lev. The Gift of, he wrote several of these books, and he was a Hasidic Jew in Brooklyn post World War II, and it was a book that, because I don't know if you went through this, but the second I graduated college and wasn't forced to read a book every single day, I actually started to select books I wanted to read and enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And that was one that I ended up reading, and it's forever changed my way, because it was dealing with a young man who was raised Hasidic in a very strict Orthodox family. And he was an artist, and he was connected with an older artist who basically made him feel less guilt about his vision of art, because he actually painted the spoiler alert, his painting that is at the climax of the book is of Jesus, and it's very controversial in what he goes through, because he becomes famous because of this piece of art. But it was just my first serious look and exploration of the true Orthodox Judaism, and it was I really, since then, it's funny, a lot of the stuff that I've enjoyed reading has had some element of religion, although I'm probably the worst Catholic out there. I always go back to
I'm
different
pretty
things
sure there are
that.
some worse Catholics. Though. We don't need to go down that road, but I'm just saying.
I read the reports.
I was
Trust
gonna
me,
say,
I
what
do.
you were talking about
That's not an
earlier.
anti-Catholic comment. Just saying.
That's just the truth.
Yeah.
But it actually is what ended up with my favorite book of all time. You can ask me what my favorite movie is, what my favorite food is, what my favorite drink is. I couldn't tell you. You ask me what my favorite book is,
You
and
know
it's
right away.
Yep, it's Lamb, the Gospel According to Biff,
I was
Christ's
going to bring
Childhood
that up.
Hell.
You let me borrow it, and I read it, and it's awesome. If you haven't read that, it's great. One of my friends is actually borrowing it right now. I don't know if he's finished it. He borrowed it a long time ago. Hey, I want my book back.
I have a confession. I think I have some of your CDs, and I think it's either the David Cross ones that you have, or it could be the Kevin Smith. Did you have Kevin Smith?
I did. Well, the DVD, yeah.
Okay, DVD. It's one of those two things. It could be both.
Yeah.
But I definitely came across those, and I was like, oh, that's gonna be like what?
Yeah. So David
15
Cross
years
is
ago or
another
something?
continuing topic on our show.
Yeah.
And the Kevin Smith one was good. Have you seen that one?
You brought it to my apartment when I was living with Dixon in Portsmouth, and we watched it.
Yeah. That's good.
I'm seeing him on Tuesday up here
Oh,
in
yeah, you're going
Portland.
to the Clerks one.
Yeah.
Oh, you guys are going to that? That's cool.
Paula got us tickets to see the Jay and Silent Bob reboot down. Yep. We went and saw it at the Wilbur Theater down in Boston, just pre-COVID. Mm-hmm. And that was an experience, because I am the type that you plop me down in big, loud clubs, cities, like theaters. I have no problem. Mm-hmm. Paula, it's just like everything's on overload.
Yeah.
And so we've come to adjust. I took her, the very first concert I took her to was to see Foo Fighters at Fenway.
Nice.
And I thought, well, that's a nice, easy one to break her in on. And then I realized, well, because 2 weeks later we went and saw Pearl Jam at the same venue. But she was just like, oh my God, get me out of here. We ended up going up to one of the high bars and just kind of hanging out up there. But we just went and saw Imagine Dragons at Fenway a couple weeks ago, and she was dancing and she was been good. I'm like, okay, she's come out of her. She's absorbed a little bit of me, and I've absorbed at least the awareness that this could be overload for her.
Right, yeah.
So, yeah, we're going to see Aerosmith Sunday up in Bangor, coming home Monday for Labor Day, and then Tuesday night after work, we're driving up to see that, and then middle of the month we're going to see Stevie Nicks up in Bangor, because that's her thing. Is she loves Pat Benatar, Stevie Nicks, so I've taken her to those shows. And
that's awesome. So, what do you guys go to, like a show every month at least?
I'm making up for COVID.
Well, my thing with concerts, because Andrew and I have gone to quite a few. Nobody big name like that, but we've gone quite a few concerts this summer, and our thing is, if anybody comes close that we remotely like, we're going to go see them, because you never know when you're going to get a chance, so you might as well. And I've rarely regretted going to a concert. I just, that's something, one of my favorite things to do. So we pretty much go to anything. Yeah. So,
they might be Giants. We're coming this month, and I debated getting tickets for that. Or is it this month or next year?
Well, they'd already been canceled and rescheduled at least once.
Yeah, I don't know. No, well, that's how I ended up seeing Primus. Yeah. Because when they were supposed to be last year, just beforehand, I was like, "Ooh, I'd like to see them," and then I checked it out, and then it was too late, and then it got scheduled next year, so I bought the tickets immediately.
That's cool.
Which was a good show. But the Pixies is one. They've come up here several times, and every time, like, yeah, I'm going to go see them, and I never buy the tickets. So next time, I keep looking. I'm like, all right, I gotta scratch this off.
Yeah.
So that was your just beat COVID. Did you have a just beat COVID good outing?
Not that I can think of. No, sorry, that's not a very exciting answer. But I think
I was.
Well, it was. Well, ours. I got into concerts later, I think, because truly the first big concert I went to, I was a freshman in college. It was I went and saw Live down here. I was up in Orono and drove down and saw that show.
Did Sigo Motto open up for him again? Did you go to that show?
No. But it started a trend, and then it was like I got to see Chili Peppers right at the end of the Californication tour when they came to Portland, and Foo Fighters opened for them.
Wow.
And that was the show. I went with Jason, Dixon, Grimmy, and Hupy. And it was the best show. Like, it made me fall in love with the Foo Fighters. And I feel bad because the Chili Peppers were like, last stop. This tour is done after tonight. It's Portland, Maine. Like, we just got to get through it. But that kind of started me down the path. So, it's been Pearl Jam, Dave Matthews, Foo Fighters a bunch. This summer, I got to cross off Blues Traveler, because when they did the show up at UMaine, I had to write a paper. So I sat in... it was back when it was Brian Shorty. It was back when it was his room. That was the what do they call it? It was the one with the chimney in it.
I was gonna say the back ramp, but that's not it.
No, it's the one. So you had the president's room. You had that room.
The loft?
No, it was president's room, loft, and then it was this one. It was that because we ended up turning it into a triple. Maya and Sneaky Pete were in it.
I know what you're talking about.
But so I'm literally sitting there typing a paper with the window open, hearing Blues Traveler play at Alphonse, and regretting every bit of delay I decided to wait. Yeah. So I got to Murr along with Jewel and saw Train for the second time, because it's like. I also saw JoJo Siwa this February.
I'm not that impressed.
I loved her show.
Really?
I might rather go to it. I think I'd rather go to JoJo Siwa than Train.
No, I'll give you that.
Train is a really good show too. And they're a headliner.
What's their song?
Drops of Jupiter. Yeah, okay. They actually have quite a few.
What's the other one? I can't remember what it is.
Okay, I just want to point out right here, we're old. everything you're describing, all of these bands, I'm like, oh, this is be like if I'm talking like when I was a kid and my dad was like, yeah, I went to, and he wouldn't, but he'd be like, yeah, I went to see like Led Zeppelin last night, or
Yeah.
If your dad went to Led Zeppelin while you were alive, that's impossible.
Oh, well,
Bonham
no.
was dead.
that's what I'm saying. It's an impossibility. I was about to say impossible dream, but it wasn't really an impossible dream.
I don't know. When Bonham's son was playing with them over in England, there were 3 shows over in England, and it was going to be the last time that Led Zeppelin performed together. I was thinking about selling my soul for tickets to go see that show. But it's I got to see Queen when they came up to New Hampshire pre-COVID. Paul and I tend to buy each other experiences instead of gifts. So
we definitely moved into that as well.
It's, that's what we try to keep an eye out for when we're looking to get stuff, because we have enough junk. We're trying to get rid of it all.
Yeah. No, I
Which
totally
brings
agree.
us to antiquing. What's up, man? Like, what's the difference between antiquing and garage sailing?
What you buy.
Okay. Do you garage sale to stock your antique stuff?
Yes.
Should you establish why you're asking him about antiquing?
You're a guy who
I have
sees old stuff.
Yes. My Paul and I have Vintage Circus Antiques and Collectibles. It's our little
Is that
side
the
hustle. Yes, that's a plug. Find us on Facebook. Give us a like. We have a booth at one of the big antique shops down in Wells. And it mostly started off, we enjoyed going yard sailing because we buy a lot of stuff that would help her with school. Whether it be anything from Legos to really cool learning stuff. She's one of these people that if I'm getting ready to throw away something that I think she could use for some unique purpose, I run it by her. I'm like, hey, this is a 4-foot long, 4-inch diameter cardboard tube. Do you want me to save it for something? And then I'll get the 3 minutes, set it aside, I'll decide tomorrow. And oftentimes, it gets recycled into something. So we excuse me.
I need to break my palate too.
Yeah, going in an entirely different direction. I'll take a little bit more as well.
Hey, bartender, hit me with another.
So, the weird sound came back. No, Paul and I would go out, and it was just a way to. I had a lot of weird collections. Like, we have a bunch of vintage cameras all on display in our living room. We buy a ton of books. We can't go past a library sale, or it's nothing that we're not like, oh, that's a first edition, or that's something special. It's, oh, I love that book, and we'll grab it and make sure we have it on our bookshelf. Or, I kind of always looked at it as, if my children were getting a syllabus at school, I wanted to make sure that every book on that syllabus was in our house. Our house is actually currently rated as a library because if you have 1,000 books or more, it's considered a library. Wow. I did not know that. So technically, actually, our living room is a library. My office is a library. So it just kind of snowballed. We always thought, hey, we'll grab this and set it aside. And if we ever open a shop, that's kind of been our joke, is that when we retire, we want to open up an antique store. My grandparents' home was an antique. Like it just was covered. So it progressed to the point where last year, I got this incredible deal on a Victrola. I don't know if
yeah.
So it was this guy, he had it out there, and I'm eyeballing it. He goes, $20. And I'm like, you're kidding.
What?
In great shape. He goes, I used it for parts for this one. He goes, and I was going to rebuild this one next. He goes, but I just don't have the time. He goes, $20, you can take it. And Paul looked at me and goes, yeah, you can't say no to that, but what are we going to do with it? We loaded it in the car, and one of the antique shops that we had visited quite a bit, we called him up and we're like, listen, you got any booth space? And he goes, you literally, it's perfect timing. Get down here, sign the contract. It was 3 days before July. And so we got the space and we moved in. And we have had just incredible success with it. It's been very nice. I tend to focus on a lot of vintage tools, a lot of mid-century barware. That's one of my favorite things.
Mid-century is in 19th century?
No,
Or
2050s. Yeah. Anything you see in Mad Men.
Yeah.
That's my jam.
I still haven't watched that show.
Oh, good show. Don Draper, another sexy man.
I heard.
Not as androgynous as Prince, but
no, in fact, probably on the opposite end of the spectrum.
But so that's where I kind of focus, is a lot of that. Anything that is more male centric, I would say, is kind of my focus. Paula's focus, and I hate to say it, but she's an expert in Pyrex.
Okay.
In fact, our kitchen, I went and built shelves that literally the house would fall down and the shelves would still be standing for her Pyrex collection.
So, I mean, I know Pyrex, but is there much of a history to Pyrex and stuff?
It is one of the most in-demand things that people are collecting these days.
So isn't it all just clear glass, or do they make other
No.
stuff?
No. That some of the most colorful.
Oh, this is one of my favorite segments. We started last week where we look at pictures that nobody can see on the camera, and we're like, oh, yeah.
Oh, this is nice.
This is beautiful. You should see this.
Although we weren't having that conversation last
No,
week.
they were very different pictures. They were not.
I'm trying to see if I actually have a picture of it, because we take it becomes such a point of reference for us, for people when we talk about the Pyrex. But it's literally 3-4 shelves of the most colorful, vivid, bright colors and designs.
Okay.
And I mean, some of these dishes, I think the most I've ever paid for a single dish, and I got it way under value. I think I probably paid about $115 for a dish, and some of these go for $700-800. Entire collections go well into the $10,000 to $12,000 range.
Yeah.
And it all started because I had a single Pyrex bowl that I used to eat my cereal out of. It was my cereal bowl. And Paula looked at it one day and goes, oh, that's beautiful. And I'm like, okay. She goes, can I see that? And I'm like, yeah, as soon as I finish my cornflakes here. And she started researching it. And there is, between that, Fire King, bakeware.
Corral?
Not as much Corel.
That used to be the big thing.
It was. In fact, those are our dishes at our house, is Corel. Yeah. But
someday
the Pyrex is like, there's this huge thing. I mean, collectors, we have people that's kind of another part of what we do, is we have people that have expressed, well, I have interest in this. If you see this when you're out, let me know. Buy it. I'll reimburse you.
Yeah.
Consignment.
Basically. In fact, Paul's ex-husband, that I'm really good friends with, anything I find related to ships, nautical theme, that's how he's decorated his house.
Nice.
So literally I'll be walking on, I'm like, found an anchor, do you want it? Cool. Found a buoy, it's yours.
That's awesome.
But that's kind of where it started, and now it's progressed into something that I hate to look at it as a business, but it's more or less the revenue from it helps supplement us during the winter months, because it's all passive income.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it kind of becomes kind of like a fun hustle where
it's something you enjoy that you turned into a way to make a little bit of extra money as well. Sort of like how you like to make laundry detergent.
Yes.
Although that's probably not generating very much money.
No,
at this point.
I made $2.50.
Hey, that's awesome.
Yeah.
By the way, sorry to interrupt, but I did want to say that naming it is a delicate shade.
Yeah, delicate shades.
It may make people think it's only used for delicates.
Oh, that's a good point.
I when I heard that, I was like,
I kind of like your Mason Street.
I really like that.
Yeah, the
but
Mason Street.
You know what's cool
company.
is because you've made money, you can officially say that you
Oh yeah,
are like legit in the laundry detergent business.
And-
Just like you've written a book
exactly.
that people
Just
have
as I am a
purchased.
published author.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
actually have
read
book
Skateboard Cowboy?
sales.
I
I
have
have
not.
bought a copy
Check
of
it
your
out.
book.
It's available on Kindle.
It is.
How much time do you devote to this passion project? Are those like comments or something? That's a weird noise.
No, I think it's
It's-
like the connection.
That's what I
So,
was
yeah.
thinking.
We're
Yeah.
It's
losing
like
our
just
connection.
well, no, it's just like loose.
Oh, okay.
Maybe.
It's because I keep playing with the cord.
Yeah. Stop unplugging it.
Yeah.
You won't have that problem.
It's so we've really kind of refined our system. It used to be we'd come home and so we'd get up at like 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, go out on a Saturday where we didn't have the kids,
Mhm.
and we go for 5, 6 hours, 7 hours,
Yeah.
grab lunch, come home, unload everything.
Yeah.
And then we got when we had a lot of inventory, we got really in the bad habit of just kind of putting it all downstairs in our
Yep.
we had shelves that were strictly for the shop, for eBay, for whatever. And it became kind of a bad habit. We
Yeah.
just throw things up. But we've gotten better to the point where now it's we come home, we unload,
Mhm.
we take a small break, and then I'll start the process of cleaning. If there's any fixes that have to be done for anything that might be a little bit broken. And then we start the process of tagging everything, putting it into our inventory, and then we load it all into boxes so
Yep.
that we can just go down on our, like usually we do that a Saturday. On a Sunday, we'll go down and spend a few minutes just assessing what we have, reorganizing it, and restocking.
It sounds like a good system in place at this point.
Yeah, it took a while because I mean, I literally went down to the basement this past May and I looked at Paul and I'm like, we don't need to shop at all. Like, we don't need to go out. We have enough inventory that we could keep things stocked really for the next year, no problem. And she hated that because that's where we have our most fun. I mean,
Well, I was gonna say that's like the fun, addicting part of it is like, I mean, addicting in a good way. Like we're gonna go out and we're gonna try to find,
The hunt.
the hunt. Yeah, exactly. That's exhilarating. It's fun, and you're doing it together. I think it's really cool that you guys are both into it. You know, if I love my wife, she's wonderful. But if I tried to say, hey, let's go to yard sales every weekend to do this, she'd be like, yeah, no interest. You know,
God, I'd be up for it, dude.
yeah. Well, you and I. Yeah.
Well, it's become something where we recognize, like we've even taken to at times, like we'll bring the dogs with us because we got a couple puppies, and some we'll take them out with us and walk them along. Some we're like, we very clearly can't bring them into this, so we'll go one at a time. And it got to the point where it'd be like, okay, you go first. Don't tell me what you think.
Yeah.
And then I'll see if I can find what it is that I think is the best deal.
Right.
And then we'll chat about it. Right. And she has come a long way. She hated the negotiation part.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't like that part.
Yeah, she'd be like, no, I don't want to do that. And for me, that's literally what my job is I negotiate all day. Yeah. So I've come to learn different tips because you can spot other quote unquote pickers when they're out. They'll ask for very specific things. They're looking for only those things, like costume jewelry or sports cards, things like that.
Yeah, they know what they're looking for.
They know what they're looking for.
Money on. Yep.
Exactly. And we try to every once in a while we'll go out and we'll actually have the kids with us.
Yeah.
And then they definitely don't think we're pickers because there's no way we're dragging 4 kids with us to go.
Gonna treat you a little differently.
Exactly. And then there were times Paula thinks she's like, we have definitely screwed up our karma because there'll be times where I'll pretend I don't know anything about an item, knowing full well what the value is. I don't know if you've the antique glass insulators, they were used on telephone poles to insulate the wires from the wood, and they're glass and about this big, and they come in like different shades of blue and brown and clear.
Did they go around the wires? Or?
They were basically sat on top of it, and the wires went into it so that it wouldn't fry the wood. Okay. Because that was, this was circa 1920s to whatever. But they're very collectible. Everybody likes them because you put them on, windows and the light shines through and they look pretty and whatnot. And I'll tell you right now, the fair market rate for most of them is between $6 and $9. And that's $9 being the higher end, really rare ones. And we were at a pick, and this woman had a milk crate filled with them. And they were dirty and cobwebs, but there had to have been at least 20, 25 of them in there. And I'm like, I've looked at it, and I'm like, what are these? Tell me about them. Like, and she's like, oh yeah, they were something to do with electrical lines. I was going to do some crafts with them. She goes, but they're just taking up space. So I'm looking to get rid of them. She goes, I'll give them all to you for $30. I'm like, oh, no, I wouldn't want to. I don't even really know what I do with them. And she goes, well, tell me a number. And I'm like, well, I don't want to insult you. I'll pay 10.
Yeah.
And she's like, okay. So I paid $10. Paul looked at me and goes, you're going to hell.
Right.
She's like, you know that's probably worth, close to $100.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, but I'm going to go home and clean them up and sell them to somebody. And in the end, I will say this. I took a few of them down to the shop and sold them there, but I also had a friend that I grew up with. I don't remember. Do you remember Tyler Manship? It was Ryan Hale's friend. He was the redheaded kid.
Yeah.
Anyway, his sister is local to our area. And she saw, I posted some of the pictures from the shop, and she saw some. And she's like, oh my God, Corey. She goes, I love those. Let me, can you save me some? And I'm like, come to my yard sale. I'll set aside a box for you, and I'll charge you $20 for it. Yeah. But hey, for me, that was taking a huge hit, because if I sold them individually, it would have been $100.
Well, the thing is, though, like, value is so subjective, because even if for that woman, like, that wasn't worth $100 to her. Like, sure, if she
got the right person along,
exactly.
I've sold stuff. Like, I had a bunch of Star Wars, like old Star Wars toys and stuff, and they were in good condition, and I'd saved them. I had them when I was a kid, and then I'd saved them for my kids, and my kids wanted nothing to do with them. And so as it got time to, like, start cleaning out stuff, I just had a bunch of stuff. I had the Millennium Falcon in there. I had a TIE Fighter in there. It was all working condition, a little beat up. All toys. And I just had a box out during a yard sale, and I don't even think I sold it. I think I may have just said, like, here, you can have this box. This lady came by, and she got psyched. She was like, oh my goodness, she's pawing through it and stuff. How much for all this? And she's willing to pay whatever. Like, just take it. I don't really care. It doesn't have that value for me. Sure, I could have been $50 or whatever, how much do you want to pay me for it? But
I won't tell you what, because the vintage toys for me has become something that I've started collecting.
Right, yeah.
In fact, my office right now is probably floor to ceiling 1980s G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, Paula went through her little burst phase where she went and bought all these American Girl dolls. And we now have, in the schoolroom, we have basically a history of American Girl dolls.
Right.
And then I would have a lot of nightmares.
Don't even get me started. But those things, like, I've been putting this collection together between that and the knockoff Transformer GoBot. I love GoBots.
Those are awesome.
Mm-hmm.
The cartoon was so much better.
I have a ton of GoBots.
Dun, 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 the GoBots, the GoBots.
Yeah. But I'm putting these collections together because when I'm able to lot together a bunch and sell them instead of piecing them off, put them as a set, I can get usually a big buyer to come in. And if I get a nice auction online, I can sell like 4 or 5 of these pieces.
Yeah.
So it's, my kids love it because they come into my office and they'll be like, can I play with this? I'll be like, yeah, go ahead. And
so where are you finding the GoBots?
Oh, eBay.
Really?
It actually, plug for Maine Vintage Toys in South Portland.
Oh, yeah. Plug for Jesse Fairbanks, owner of Maine Vintage Toys in South Portland.
They have treated me very well. They ship stuff to me all the time. In fact, my Facebook Messenger scroll with them. But yeah, I've just whenever I've seen a random piece, I'll throw out offers, or I do a lot of negotiating on eBay. Like I'll find a piece and then find like 2 other things that the seller might have that I want, and try to get them to come down on their price, so that when it averages out, the bigger the lot, I can usually make some money.
So would you say that Jesse Fairbanks has fair prices?
Very fair prices. No, honestly, they have been awesome. We take the boys up probably. Well, we missed the Toy Fest this weekend.
Oh, yeah.
We wanted to get over to that. But yeah, my oldest stepson is really a new in box, and the other one's like ripping it open, playing with it.
Yeah.
So it's whenever we buy something from Merrick, we usually try to buy him 2, one he can keep in the box and one he can open and play with. So
his name's Merrick. So there's Merrick Garland, and that's like the only time I've ever heard that name. And then now, cool.
Well, it's funny. There's also a chicken disease called Merrick's disease that our chickens caught in our backyard. So it was very interesting that we had chickens that had Merrick's disease and a Merrick living in our house.
Is it a common disease?
Yeah, actually. Yeah. They usually have to get a vaccine for it.
What is it?
It basically shuts down their nervous system over time. So we had a flock of 6 or 7, and eventually it withered to just 2 or 3. And that's when we started noticing the same kind of residual, that they weren't getting attacked by anything. It was just they'd stop like moving. Their comb would start to fade, and we had one that actually froze one day. It got cold in the coop and froze. So we brought her inside. It was Chewbacca. So we had a chicken in a box in our living room for a month.
Chicken in a box.
This is what I love about our podcast, that we can go from talking about random people you guys used to work with, to collecting antiques and reselling them, to diseases that affect like domestic fowl. Like it's pretty impressive. I work with somebody.
It's the beauty of conversation.
Yeah, it is. I work with somebody that has chickens, and they named them after powerful or heroic women. And last year they had Amelia Earhart, and she went missing. And it was legit happened. That was kind of funny.
That is cool.
Yeah, we lost our last one got by a fox. And like chickens they need to have other chickens. Like they're a social creature. Except this one bird, who when the second to last died, we're like, okay, well, this is gonna be months. It's not gonna be long. No, she lasted for almost a year and a half.
Wow.
And actually started producing eggs for the first time. She hadn't produced at all. Like, she was loving life. Of course, she also got to be brought inside during the cold because she couldn't be in the roost by herself.
Right.
So
was she chicken in the box too?
She was chicken in the box too.
Nice.
Do you have any neighbors with chickens?
That neighbor used to have chickens. I want to get chickens. Candy will not let me get chickens.
Don't.
The worst thing in the world is in the middle of the night if they ever get attacked. Have you ever had that experience with your neighbors? They get attacked, and you can hear all the chickens go crazy, and then one of them will get injured, and then all night it will just go like, like all night. Like you can tell there's like a dying or severely injured chicken out there, and you're just like waiting for your neighbors to come. Like,
right.
Yeah.
We get that we have a lot of cats in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I don't know how frequently that usually happens around, but I feel like it's very frequent here, where there's like cats being attacked, fighting, mating, or doing whatever cats do to make horrendous noises throughout the night. But there's all sorts of animal noises. So why don't get chickens?
They're just so much work. And honestly, the downside is we got very accustomed to having a ton of fresh eggs. And that was nice. But they had gotten the chickens for my stepdaughter Avery when she was, I think, 13, and built the coop in the backyard. And then they got more chickens, and Avery got older and got other interests, and so the chickens didn't become a priority.
So the same thing that happens with a dog or any other pet also happens with chickens.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it's I mean, there's effort to it, and it stinks.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
You have so much, and honestly, it's a lot of effort for eggs.
Yeah.
I'm
sell the
totally.
eggs?
Yeah.
No, we ate them. They were fucking delicious.
Okay.
I don't think I've ever had like fresh chicken eggs. They say they're amazing, but and I'm totally for it. The biggest issue we had, besides chickens getting mortally wounded in the middle of the night and taking hours to die, is that we had a lot of rats that came along with them,
yes.
and that was a bit of an issue. And there are other factors that go into that because they're doing a lot of work in Portland, and so rats have been an issue everywhere. But we had rats in like our neighbors' yards and stuff, and I'm pretty sure they had to
I just heard on NPR they were talking about that recently.
Yeah.
And they have this rat catcher. I don't know what the title is, but a rat guy, and he was
in general, I'm totally supportive of people having
the
chickens.
Pied Piper of Maine.
Well, it's a couple factors that impact impact Maine and the prevalence of rats is the river infrastructure.
Yeah.
Because rats, they are usually near rivers and also mill, textile, and otherwise.
Yeah.
Mills tend to draw them. So, like, I grew up in Brewer, and especially South Brewer, it was famous for river rats. In fact, that was the name of the 50s, like, bad, group with the river rats.
Isn't there a team down here?
Sanford River Rats.
Yes.
And so I moved to the other city in Maine that had river rats.
So he is the Pied Piper.
Yeah.
Good job.
Well, here's one. Do you remember Betty?
Yep.
Yes.
Betty
is a rat.
She is a South Brewer River rat. She literally, I walked in the very first time I met her, and she looked at me, and she goes, "So who are you?" I'm like, "I'm Bubba." She goes, "Bubba what?" I go, "Bubba Coffin." She kind of looks at me. She goes, "Where are you from, Bubba?" And I'm like, "I'm from Brewer." And she immediately stops and straightens right up. She goes, "Where'd you live?" And I go, "Patton Court." I go, "Probably don't know that." And she goes, "Oh, I know it." She goes, "I was on Grove Street." And she looks at me and she goes, "You're a river rat."
And then you guys whipped out knives and did like a dance number fighting, right? Yeah.
No, she grew up with my dad and uncles, so she knew all of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's why the rats are so bad.
It would have been much more exciting if they did a dance number.
I think they did. He's just not telling you.
She had a butcher knife.
Yeah. Right back. See, now you have somebody to talk to.
Oh.
This Andre does this every once in a while where he leaves. And the issue is that I am I don't know, a little more introverted than he is. So like I can't just like ramble on for a while about nothing. So it's nice having somebody else.
Well, I'm happy to participate in the rambling.
Yeah, very good.
So school just started back up for you.
First week of school, yeah.
How are you faring?
Okay. Today was day number 2, which is much better than day number 1. Day number 1 is super stressful because you have 20 kids, and we're fortunate 20 is actually a small number, but we have 20 kids, and you sort of have this schedule, and you have all these little tiny, like, you're not following like a normal, I'm going to teach math class for an hour. Now I'm going to teach reading class for an hour. You're trying to fill it with like little name games and get to know you activities and icebreakers. And you don't know how long each one's going to take. You have an idea, a general idea, but you don't know. And you're also not quite sure your schedule. So you're constantly having to like check the clock. And then you've got behaviors to manage. So it's like the most stressful day. I came home yesterday and I was more tired than I remember ever being. Like I was in bed by 7 o'clock. I was just like dead. And so today was a much better day. But yeah, getting back into it.
The rhythm of, first of all, the rhythm of the school year, let alone the rhythm of actually your day to day. I am so happy I do what I do.
But again, it's one of those things, like, I mean, I'm sure everybody, you get a bunch of lawyers in a room, you get a bunch of anybody in a room, they're going to talk about like how like stressful and awful their job, like, but like, yeah, like teaching, like, it's insane. Really, really is demanding. Like I said, the hardest thing is just it's like you're being on stage all day. You can't take a break, and then you've got to immediately be ready for the next day. And it's the same thing over and over and over again until the school year gets done. So it's like,
I found it was one of the Paul and I talk about it a lot because I mean she hosts camps during the summers where she'll bring in like Harry Potter camp's been her like favorite every year that people come back to and they love it. But she takes basically that overarching theme and then incorporates whether it be science or reading and things in it. And the very first time that she and I went shopping for supplies for her for
Mhm.
one of the camps or one of the classes she was teaching. We walked in, and I looked at her and I said, "All right, so let me see your shopping list. We'll break it up, and I'll go get half, and you go get half." And she looked at me and she goes, "What do you mean?" I go, "Well, you have a list, right?" She goes, "I don't have a list." What are you talking about? She goes, "Yeah, if I see it," she goes, "I'll have an idea, and then I'll start to build an idea around it, and then I'll start to come up with my lesson, and I'll start to look for the other things that I need for it." And it was only recently that we discovered how she and I project plan from opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And she starts with the idea and builds up.
Yeah.
I start with the end result and break down.
Yeah.
And that has been probably the most difficult part of our marriage, is figuring out how the other thinks about a project and teaching all that is project.
Well, and what's interesting about that is you basically, and I don't want to speak broadly, I've never done any homeschooling or anything like that, but you have really kind of described, I think, a big difference between a lot of homeschooling and a lot of public education, where we have certain standards that we are required to teach. And so we are taught to do a lot of backwards planning. You start with, here's the end result that we need to get kids to, let's go back to that. Whereas this other school of teaching is, let's think about a project, and then what skills can we build into that. And there are some public schools that teach that way as well, but it is definitely two different ends of the spectrum that you have in education as well. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's really kind of seems neat that, so she's an educator who does a lot of at home, like homeschooling, and you said like running these camps and things like that. So does she bring in a lot of other kids and stuff like that? So that's kind of cool that she's made kind of a career or whatever from education, but doing it in her own a way that fits her really well.
And that's been the thing, is that, at first it started off with, because she worked, I don't know if you ever went, but do you remember when I had the apartment with, who in Dover right before? So there was a preschool right next door.
Okay.
Paula actually worked at that preschool when she first got out of college. And she was raising, she had Riley when she got pregnant when she was 20. And her and Mark were engaged at the time. And, they started with a family right out the gate.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then Avery came along a couple of years later. Merritt came along a few years after that. And then Cyrus came along. So in the span of 10 years, she's had 4 kids, and trying to find the best way to manage children at home became homeschooling.
Yeah.
And it was already something that she was prepared for. And I really hope she's going to watch this later, and I really hope I'm not screwing up your story. I love you.
Yeah.
So she has got into the homeschool because there are a lot of co-ops out there.
Yep.
And then through the co-ops, she basically created a network of other moms. She actually got contacted this year by a number of moms that said, "Hey, I know all your kids are out. So would you be interested in starting a homeschool pod?" Basically 4 or 5 kids that she'd homeschool.
Right.
And one of the things that we had sat down once and talked about a business plan, what it would take for her to actually turn this into a business.
Right. Yep.
And because she hates the business aspect of it.
Right.
And I'm the one asking all those questions of like, okay, so what's your overhead? What's your capital investment? What do you need to, and she's looking at me like I'm crazy. But she did a great job this time of actually breaking it down and saying, okay, this is what I think my costs are going to be. We went over them. She was spot on. And then she started working backwards. And then she even discounted on top of that. And the second these people started to ask questions about homeschooling and making this pod, she said, okay, so this is what I do. This is how much it would cost. And they all were like, oh, we can't afford that. And that's the thing with homeschoolers, is that most of the time it's single income families where the mother is electing to do this. And there isn't a lot of extra money to go to these type of resources. But I was really proud of her, because I hate to use the term drew a line in the sand, but she actually started to value herself and her skills, which is something that oftentimes she's not done. She's been willing to forego any type of money to make sure the kids are getting educated. Or right now she works for another plug, Snapology of Dover. Snapology.
She writes the little things that go under the caps.
Yeah. We have contests at work.
So that's all STEM based. It's all Lego based or Roblox or things like that.
Yeah.
And it's been really nice for her because she can pick and choose when she wants to teach, and they'll, the owner of it, she's awesome. They work really well together. And there's a few other teachers that she works with. Some of them are either coming up as teachers or retired teachers to making a little extra money.
Yep.
But she started to really see the value in what she does. Yeah. And that's one thing that it's really been insightful, and it's why I kind of heaped on the praise, because I've now seen behind what goes into, I mean, when she said, I got a lesson plan. Okay, well, what does that look like for you?
You're right.
And it's, I mean, between that, she does catechism school because we work with the church. So she does that. It is the thing that I kind of taught, or I wouldn't say taught, that's giving me credit. What we talked about and she understood was that for every hour that she's teaching, there's really 2 or 3 hours that's going into that hour of teaching. Like you said, I have to be ready. I'm on stage and not getting the credit for that amount of work that goes into it.
Yeah.
That's great.
So,
it's interesting. I think a lot of people think that public school teachers are anti-homeschool teachers, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think what we see is that homeschooling can mean a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And there are certainly people that, it sounds like your wife does a really good job with it. She values the education of it. She does a great job. But there are certainly families that say, we're going to homeschool our kid, and then they're not getting the education that they need. And we often see those kids then come back and they're just so far behind because they haven't really been doing the schooling part of it. And then there's the social aspect too. I think it's really important that if you're going to be homeschooling, that you're providing the opportunities for your kids to socialize with other kids and all that stuff. And again, I think there are a lot of people that probably do it really, really well. And then there are some people that don't do it well. So I don't think we're definitely as a whole not anti-homeschool. I think for some kids, that's a great experience. And I think for a lot of kids, it's probably, they get more out of it than they could get out of a public education, because we have to deal with, not deal with, that's the wrong way of saying that, but we have to, work with students that are across a huge spectrum of learning abilities and dealing with, we talked about earlier, the social emotional piece of it. And so, differentiating for every kid, meeting all their learning needs is a really hard task, and being able to do that in a homeschool situation is a lot better. So
I think that's kind of like the key to it. Like the advantage of a homeschool environment when it's done, within is that you've got a smaller group typically, and you're very intimately, like you're intimate with those kids, like one way, shape, or form, whether it's like somebody else's kids or whatever. But because you've got that small group, you're intimate, and you know what their learning needs are, versus that public school where, like you say, you've got maybe 20 kids in your classroom, and then they've all got different things going on that they're bringing to the table as well. And you can't, I'm not going to say you can't, I'm not a teacher, but okay, from a teaching perspective of martial arts with a large group of kids there, I'm trying to teach something, and I know that some of those kids don't want to be there for some reason or another, and I know that some of those kids really do want to be there because they really enjoy it, and I've got to try to balance that class. I can't just like go to those kids that really want to be there and say, all right, we'll work on
we're going to ignore all those kids.
I know you don't want to be here.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I remember Paul and we talk about this a lot. By and large, when you have class sizes, you are, and I often use this principle with like my employees, there's that 60% that's in the middle that you probably have the biggest impact on, because you're able to raise them up. But you have the 20% that are on the bottom end of the spectrum, where no matter how much you do, you're not really going to move that needle much. And then you have the 20% at the top end of the spectrum, where they're going to be so damn bored by what you're teaching the 60%. That so you're never finding, you can only help so many with what you're trying to do. And I remember as a kid, I legit, I will never forget this, 4th grade, 5th grade, and part of 6th grade, I wasn't in most of my classes because I was in the hall with 1 or 2 other kids reading books that were advanced or doing lessons that were advanced, because I was going to be bored in the classroom. And like the idea of that is, shit, like that kind of, looking back on it, that sucks. I didn't get to interact with my peers and I was always separated from them. So that went into more of driving a wedge between me and my social interactions with people, and why socially I was probably delayed a little bit.
Well, that's why I really, so did you guys not have like gifted and talented programs?
We did, but even then it was gifted and talented might be 1 hour once a week.
It's still limited, but that, like, I remember being in those programs. Like
Did you go to Enrichment Center?
Yeah, I went to the Enrichment Center, like right down the street.
I love going there. That was pretty
awesome.
kick-ass.
And it was so fun, and and you were taken away from like the normal learning environment, and you got to do logic problems. And you
play
got
computer games back when it was like,
and it was
super old computers, but it was super cool.
And
you died of dysentery on the Oregon Trail.
I still sometimes speak German, like Guten Morgen, Guten Morgen, Frau Delvey, sehr gut, danke, sehr gut.
But it was like so fun, and like I hear these news stories and stuff about different places taking out the gifted and talented programs for whatever. We don't need to get into that, but like it's too bad. Like those things are absolutely, for as little as they do in that moment, but except for give great memories.
But
that
was awesome. But anyway,
so let's scroll down here. I mean, we've been running for a bit.
We're at like an hour and a half right now.
Yeah, it's not the longest we've gone, but so we've gotten through the
introduced Corey.
Good job. Let's say we've gotten through what's on our minds today.
Yeah, I think
that was that whole thing. Reviews. I did not put this here.
Should we table Homer and Eddie, since Corey has not seen Homer?
I have not seen the movie, but I did hear the song. And
I forgot to listen to the song.
You didn't listen
to the song. I saw you post the song.
You know what? I'm going to give you a pass on that, because I wrote a song for my wife that I tagged her in and everything. I'm like, do you listen to it? Do you listen to it? She has not listened.
No. So I saw that you posted the song, but I hadn't seen the movie yet. And I was like, I need to watch the movie first so I can appreciate the song. And I forgot to go back and listen to the song. So I say we table that, so I can listen to the song, and then we can talk about.
I have to share this because my home office, I actually have a separate room, and I have my big triple monitor set up and everything else. But above, I have a TV, and I will keep my TV on during the day and run the most mundane things. So I have static, basically. Night Court, by the way, has been my latest.
I would get sucked into Night Court. That would be a problem.
That's what they need to do a remake of.
They are.
Are they?
Yes. The Melissa Rauch, I think is her name, the tiny blonde from Big Bang Theory with the high voice.
Okay.
She's going to play Harry Stone's daughter and come back as a judge.
Nice.
And they're going to redo it that way.
Does she do? She'll have to do magic, right?
I'm assuming.
Magic?
Yeah.
Is Martin Mull still around? Not Martin Mull.
Is that Bull?
It's not Bull.
It's Mull, but it's not Martin. Martin Mull's the guy with the glasses.
I was like, right when I said that, I'm like, that's not him.
Because I did the same thing the other day. Richard Mull. And the other bailiff at the end.
The black lady?
Yes, War something.
That's not Dionne Warwick.
No. And then John Larroquette. He is actually going to be in it. The other two haven't been confirmed. And then like literally everybody else is dead.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Yeah, Marky Post. I didn't know.
I was going to say Marky Post is dead.
She died within a week of Charles Robinson, who played Mac.
No kidding.
Back in 2020.
They were like Sure, I like Mac.
That was one of those
Yes.
shows. That was like one of the homesick shows that
Yeah.
I would watch all the time. Like that one was on. Quantum Leap was one,
Yes.
which I love.
Quantum
They
Leap.
should totally do
They
a
are
remake
doing
of
a
Quantum.
remake of that.
Are
They
they
are?
really?
Yeah, I just saw a Facebook post.
Oh, I'm gonna
That
have to
is
tell
the
my
best.
wife. We talk about Quantum Leap all the time. I
Yeah.
love that show.
Yeah.
That and the super offensive movie where the kid plays a black guy.
Yeah.
Soul Man.
Soul Man.
Soul Man. Yes.
By the way, I asked Paula to send me. That is what Pyrex
Oh,
looks
wow.
like. That's our.
Oh
kitchen.
yeah. We got some of those.
Okay, so I didn't realize that was all Pyrex.
Yeah, like
You
the
can't see
green
this.
one with the little flower pattern. Like oh yeah.
Some of
My
these,
mom's
like-
got like 8
Yeah.
of those.
I didn't realize that was Pyrex.
These right here, that one. Yeah, those are.
Again, my favorite thing when we look at pictures, nobody there can see.
I thought that was
Any-
Corelware, like all
No.
of those.
No, these are Pyrex, and they go for bang.
Do you have your cereal bowl in there? Which,
No, but I can. I think that is what my cereal bowl used to look
yeah,
like.
but that
we
was all
have
like that.
those. Yeah, those are cool.
I gotta go to my mom's house and start.
Okay,
thinking
I'll
about her old-
describe this for you. It
Folks,
was-
there you
okay.
go.
Yeah, you're smarter than us.
Turn the phone.
All you had to do was turn the phone around.
Boom.
But no, the reason why I wanted to bring this up is so I was actually upstairs. That's when I usually watch your podcast. Is I'll have it on while I'm listening to something, and every once in a while I'll send something to Paula to be like, "Oh my god, they mentioned me again."
So our podcast is like static.
Yeah.
Is what,
Well,
good
you know,
makes good background
start.
noise. Yeah.
But I'm trying to see it. She just told one of her friends about it. Who this is a friend that lives in Florida. They both grew up in Connecticut together, and the friends in Florida now they talk all the time, all day long.
About our podcast.
No, but so
Yes, we got
Homer and Eddie. It's a movie. She watched it. She was messaging me that.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to describe it,
Yeah,
though.
I mean, that's the hook. Really.
I was playing it. My daughters were actually in the living room when I played it, and my youngest kind of did one of these and looked, and like, Dada, what are you watching? I'm like, it's a song one of my friends is singing, and she just kind of looked back at it. She goes, "That's a weird song."
Yeah.
She's gonna be in her head for the rest of her life.
It's a movie.
So I forced Riley to listen to it because he was eating something in the dining room, and I mentioned it. I was like, "Oh, you got to listen to my song. You got to listen to my new drop." And so he's.
I'd love to know what your boys actually think of you when you.
Oh,
do things like that.
they are not impressed with my skills. So he's sitting in there eating, and I just turned it on and turned up the volume in the living room real quick, and he just. and then like he hears me start like rapping in it, and he's just like, you see him like turn his head a little bit.
So you will never disappoint your children as much as I scarred my two oldest stepdaughters.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much you know about my involvement with Rocky Horror.
Yeah.
That's actually how Paul and I met.
I've seen the show.
We did a stage production
I
of
get
Rocky
all
Horror.
where this is going. I'm
Um,
scared.
and it was something that I loved when I was in college. It's just gotten more and more. In fact, in our living room, we have one of the movie posters, and we have a shadow box with some of our tickets and things like that. In fact, we just
Sure.
during COVID, we rented out Smitty's in Sanford, one of their theaters, and showed it, and everybody came in costume because you
Oh,
could do
that's
that.
cool.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So we were going to a show in Portsmouth. It was just Paula and her ex, me and my ex, and this basically this whole group of us were at the house that I was living in Dover.
That's a very progressive thing.
We were all best friends, and
Okay.
whole backstory. That's
Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to go there. I apologize.
so we all got dressed to go to the show because we go in costume.
Yeah.
And my stepdaughter's there because they were going to watch my bio daughters while we went to the show.
Yeah.
And all the younger kids had been put to bed. So I'm getting ready and I'm going in full drag. I ended up getting second place in the costume contest. That was
Why didn't you get first?
Yeah, I know. That's
because the guy, we were actually partners, and I give him first place because I think he got slightly more cheers.
you know that Bubba was really into Rocky Horror Picture Show?
I did. I saw a performance.
Really?
Yeah, a couple years ago. It was really good.
I
would have loved to have seen Bubba in Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Next time.
I'll see if I can find a couple pictures of
Are you guys
me.
doing it this year?
No, the theater company folded pre-COVID.
I didn't ask that. I asked if you were doing Rocky Horror Picture Show.
we actually just did.
Can that be our next podcast episode?
Oh my
We'll do a.
Yes.
The three of us will work together. That's not you.
That's me.
That is not you.
That's me.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
That was when before my baby weight.
That wasn't last year.
Just saying. Everybody does it
No.
too.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Looking
do you
good.
remember Colleen and
No.
Robin? They used to work with us at CCS.
Oh, wait. Go back to
Oh, good.
Colleen.
We're back on more people that nobody knows from CCS.
I do remember Robin.
But I'll see if I can find a picture from
What?
CCS guy.
yeah. So I come out in this costume and proceed to scar. Oh, yeah, here's the.
I want to see the first place winner.
I'm trying to find it because he and I were actually sashaying together on stage. Yeah, there we are.
Sachet Chanter.
So that's me and first place.
Oh, come
Oh,
on.
okay.
Now.
We
He
were-
was wearing a skirt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I am literally dressed like that. We went to, I don't know if you're familiar with Martingale Wharf in Portsmouth, very high-end, ritzy restaurant down on the wharf. We went there for drinks before we went to the show because the show was up the hill from there.
Oh, dressed in
And
full
drag.
Nice.
And Paula was actually in a similar but appropriately themed for her costume, and her ex, he was more of a Brad. He was just wearing the such an appropriate term, but wife beater, and the white. Yeah, thank you.
White
What-
tank top would have been
White
a good
tank
way
top.
to describe
But that's
that.
what I never
Undershirt.
undershirt.
White undershirt tank top.
Is that what? Okay.
I think that's what they're called.
My apologies. I honestly, that's the
You're
only
a
term I've
monster.
ever heard.
Right, that's what everybody always
Yeah.
calls them. I even heard that like on like the news or something recently. Somebody was referring like mainstream like TV,
Yeah.
and I was kind of like, ooh,
There should be a
seems
better
really-
term for
well,
that.
there needs to be.
The craziest thing is like I make it better by just saying beater, but still it's
That's
like,
still
It's
terrible.
still, yeah.
horrendous. Yes.
So
but
yeah,
undershirt.
I'm literally walking through Portsmouth, and we walk down, and we're like, "Can we get a table?" And the hostess, honestly, it would have been better if I turned around and taken a dump in front of her because I think her reaction would have been the
Yeah.
same. And I'm like, "We just need a table. We're gonna have drinks." And they walked us through, and there was nothing like seeing the people's reaction.
Yeah.
So we just actually went to a midnight show at the same theater. It's the Seacoast Rep in Portsmouth a few weeks back. But I've since gone from being in drag, and now I'm Eddie. I don't know if you remember
Yeah.
Meatloaf's character.
Yeah.
So instead,
R.I.P.
that hurt. I have a fake tattoo of a cut on my forehead that's all stitched up to look like Eddie. And we went to several bars, and you want to see a bunch of drunk millennials try to process what's going on when they see somebody my age
Yeah.
dressed up like Eddie with this huge gash on his forehead, trying to get a couple beers before we go to the show. They had no way of like one guy looked at me and goes, "Man, that's a bad cut." I'm like, "It's a tattoo," knowing that it's a temporary
Yeah,
tattoo,
right, right.
thinking he'll assume, and he goes, "That's the worst tattoo ever."
Did you see my regret one?
I would, so
Regrets.
going to see a performance of that, it'd be something that would be on like my list of things I'd love to do sometime. I've never done.
Yeah.
Going to see Bubba and it would be especially high on that list. But yeah, I think that'd be really cool.
We got sex toys at the end, so
okay.
Well, it's you got to understand that when I was in the show,
Yeah.
I was the in the movie. I'm assuming you've seen the movie.
Yeah, yeah.
The criminologist, but in the stage show, you have directors like to do one of two things: keep you separated from the cast or integrate you with the cast.
Yeah.
Mine integrated me with the cast, so I'm moving around them, talking to them, interacting with them.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also the only one interacting with the audience.
Yeah.
And the audience is the only, like, they're interacting with the actors, trying to throw them off. So, I mean, it's such a high because you're allowed to basically riff. If something happens, you can riff, you can make a joke, you can play with it, you can do all these things. And so, like, my director is basically like, I know you're going to have fun with this, do whatever you want. This is the character. Go.
That's awesome.
And
That's
let me build my costume. So, like, I remember one year I had an inflatable sheep that I carried around. I had vibrators, old pocket, like, you name it.
Pocket what?
Pocket, yeah.
Protectors.
This is a kid-friendly podcast.
So night. So but it was always fun. Now, the craziest parts were I would often be told, listen, harass the guy playing Rocky, whoever's playing Rocky. You go out throughout the show, you molest him on stage, like, you do all these things. Okay, that's great. First year, nice guy, he was awesome, he did great. Then he starts dating my oldest stepdaughter. Couple years later, new Rocky. I am all over him, like, yeah. He starts dating my stepdaughter right after.
Same one?
Yep.
Okay. That's an odd coincidence.
It is, but it's all that theater community, because she was doing shows that weren't Rocky.
Right, yeah.
So they actually started dating after doing Godspell together.
Yeah.
But there is nothing that is quite as weird to see your stepdaughter in stage wearing, or off stage in the audience wearing, lingerie while you're on stage in lingerie dancing. It's one of those moments that's very surreal.
Yeah, you know what? That's like a really good, I guess. I mean, it's like it's a very interesting dynamic, like a powerful dynamic. I guess that's the word I'm looking for. Like,
or liberating, like you could just be whatever.
It's a good relationship in that sense, because like it's kind of like you're bringing that creative self to whatever, and like you say, like that liberation, like, hey, this is what I'm doing, whatever. We're having a good time. Cool. We're putting together something that we're enjoying the time together. And it's not like you have these walls necessarily that are typically there with with relationships.
What you're saying is not inappropriate, but it can really go.
It can go.
I'm thinking about things now.
Well, so truthfully, all of my stepkids knew me for about 6-7 years before Paul and I got together. Okay. So I had I was already friends with each of them, and had very different experiences with them, different relationships. I'm extremely fortunate. My oldest stepdaughter, she is an amazing young woman, and I don't want to take anything from my youngest stepdaughter, because she's an amazing woman, but they are very different, and they've had different relationships with me. So much so that I always want to make sure I'm showing the right amount of affection. Like, I never want to show too little affection to any of my stepkids, because, my youngest stepson will constantly come up to me, dude, can I have a hug? And he's 15. And I'm like, awesome. Yeah, man, come on. Like, my oldest stepson, he'll ask for a hug once in a while, but he's got a different, but we connect in a very different way. So I've had very individual type of relationships with each. But it is amazing. Like, I am so privileged because I've watched Paula and Mark, their dad. They are amazing parents, and they were at it for close to 20 years by the time I came along. And like, I feel bad because I'm always like looking at Paula saying, yeah, you kind of re-upped. You were close to retirement. Like, you're getting out and you re-upped for another 18 years. But I've had such incredible role models, if you will, out of the two of them, and the way that they parent. They are so cooperative. Even after getting divorced, they have an extremely strong co-parenting relationship. They meet, they talk, we get together, we round table, and it is remarkable that these kids are they have such strong, healthy, independent natures about them, and their mental health is something that we're constantly they're very aware of, which I mean, when I was their age, my idea of mental health was what I put in a bong. Like you guys know it. Like that's how I coped.
Yeah.
And that seeing each of them and how they're processing it, it's got me full of hope. Like, hey, the world's got a chance here, seeing, kids that turn out like this.
Yeah.
I would say too, like, well, with the mental health thing, it's a whole new world now anyway, with that awareness of it all, like what you were talking about earlier, and giving a shout out to therapy. Cheers to therapy.
Cheers to therapy.
Yeah.
But like that whole thing is a whole new world. And I think when we were that age, and I'm not taking anything away from what they were doing. That's awesome. That's absolutely true. But when we were that age, I don't recall ever having any sort of like therapies, something that's good or whatever. It wasn't even something that was bad necessarily.
It just wasn't.
Yeah.
Like you knew people that
was
go to therapy, but it was
Dr. Katz. Remember that?
Yeah.
Like, that
Frasier.
They were comedies.
But like, yeah, it was. You knew that people went there, but it didn't feel like the normal thing that everybody did, kind of thing. Yeah, absolutely. I feel like, and it's probably not something that's true everywhere, but I feel like the more it's become more of a mainstream thing, it's so much better off for.
Yeah.
Like even my daughter, who's going into 4th grade, she talks about like, oh, I think I should go see a therapist for like, and I never would have ever brought that up as a as a kid, but like just knowing that, it's becoming normalized, and it's
a self-awareness.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a big part of it. Like I think that the stigma, the more people talk about it, like I am probably overshare it, but it's because I'm trying to normalize it with other people.
I do the same thing. Yep.
And I was at that Imagine Dragons show, and literally lead singer out on stage, and he's talking about, if you don't have a therapist, you need one. I talk to mine every week. It's the best hour of my week. Like, and hearing, I mean, they use their platform for so many issues, and by the way, Macklemore was awesome at the beginning of that show. It was Fenway had a great weekend of shows. Lady Gaga, Macklemore, Imagine Dragons.
I thought you were about to say Lady Gaga opened for Imagine Dragons.
No. She was the night before. She was Friday. Yeah. But they use their platform for such a positive message for their fans to make sure that they understand that they are important, they're loved, there's, what they have for options, and not to lose hope and things like that. And I look back at, okay, so if you get back into the 60s and 70s, most artists were using their platform to talk about social issues, but it wasn't as overt. It was more subtle, or if it, with the exception of people like Bob Dylan, who, hit you over the head with it, there weren't a lot of artists that were out there talking about social change in such a robust way. Yeah. And I think this is nice to see some of these artists taking and using their privilege to do that.
Yeah. Do you think, but I wonder though, if you're right. But I wonder at the same time, like the platform is different. So like nowadays it's so easy to get your voice out there through, whether it be through social media, on top of your music and on top of everything else, and from that artist perspective, like there's kind of, the art is the subtlety, right? So if you're writing music, if you're a poet, if you're whatever, you're not necessarily wanting to hit the nail on the head every time. You don't want to like beat your audience down with, that's what I'm saying, except unless you're Bob Dylan. but like, so, and I feel like, so when I write stuff sometimes, Homer and Eddie, for example.
Or the Beta's back. Beta boys are back.
Beta boys are back. You know, I'm very subtle with my message. But no, like when I've written like poetry and stuff like that, like, and I in the back of my head, there's kind of, you know, I'll want to write something, but then I'm like, oh, I don't want to write that. Like, I want to write something that's a little bit different. That you have to think about. And then there's that part of me that's like, well, if you're a goddamn idiot. But like that's kind of like there is the artist side of me.
But there's also the fuck it. Why do I have to, like, you know, hide it or write it in a subtle way or use metaphors or like, let's just put it out there. Like,
right.
I think that's
at that point it's not art.
I'm
not saying it's not art, but I'm saying like there's that mindset that it's not art.
But I think there's still something beautiful in being able to be honest with who you are and to be able to understand who you are and put out your real human experience. I think that's like one of the big things with doing this podcast for me was I personally struggled with a lot of things throughout my life. And that all had to do with mostly anxiety and, you know, whether it was social anxiety or just, I mean, it all stemmed back to that. And being able to come up like to terms with that and be aware of that has kind of put me in a totally different place. And so now I feel like I want to be like really open and honest with who I am and what I deal with. And I'm really interested in what's going on inside other people's head. Like, I feel like I've been so wrapped up in what's going on inside my head. And I've come to this big realization. I talk about this as sort of like, I feel like this is my midlife crisis, is really coming to really understand what's going on inside, going with me, and realizing Andre's probably dealing with a lot of the same shit, or maybe it's his own shit that's different than my shit, but it's still shit, and we're both dealing with it. And Bubba's got his own stuff too, and I'm really curious about connecting with people on that human level. Yeah. And so I appreciate when people are saying, here's who I am and who I'm dealing with, especially when it's somebody who is this popular musician that doesn't have to say, here's my stuff that I know a lot of people keep inside and don't want to share because it's kind of embarrassing or it feels awkward. And they're willing to put it out there. One of our favorite bands is Judah and the Lion. I don't know if you guys have ever heard anything by them, but like we've seen them in concert a bunch of times. And a lot of their songs, it's kind of funny because we go and see them as 40, like, you know, I don't want to have a suit and tie. I don't want to grow up. And like, that shit that I dealt with. And a lot of their stuff is about insecurities or being, you know, dealing with stress. And they put it right out there. Like, this is, you know, the stuff I'm dealing with. I'm having a hard time dealing with this stuff. And it's like, yeah, dude, so am I. Like, you know, I think it's connecting on a human level and just being honest with who you are and what's going on with you, I think is a beautiful thing. And I wish, you know, if more people can be like that, it's so much healthier for everybody. So like, I'm really happy that that's kind of the place I am in my life. And so I appreciate when other people are in that same place and willing to put it out there. And, you know, I think there's something beautiful in being able to, you know, have that artistic way of dealing with it. But I also appreciate people that are just willing to have an honest conversation or honest music or honest whatever and say, this is, you know, what I'm dealing with. I think is
okay. I want to clarify here. I was not saying that I didn't appreciate it.
No, I know. You're talking about.
I was giving the difference.
Well, it's funny you say it because when I was listening to one of the podcasts saying you were talking about your journals, and I wrote so much when I was age 18 to age 26, 27. I was writing every day as a way of managing my inner turmoil, managing my stress, my anxieties, my everything that was going on. And it slowly faded to the point where, and part of it was personal. There was somebody in my life that demanded to see all of it, and I didn't. That was for me. It wasn't for sharing. It was.
I'm sorry about that. I shouldn't have been so upfront.
We all know who we're talking about here. But it turned me off to writing because I was being judged for it, and that wasn't the purpose of what that was. That was my escapism. Is how I handled my substance abuse, my own personal issues. Is I put pen to page, and it wasn't direct. It was, like you said, using art. And I have gotten so out of practice and gotten so far detached from I don't know. I spend so much time writing every day, coming up with the right words, the meanings, making sure that contextually what I'm conveying is what I intend, that to sit down now and try to write and have that same connection, I don't feel like I feel like that muscle is so out of shape that I couldn't go there. I couldn't do that. And it first of all, it's a little sad because that was something I really connected with myself. It was part of my identity.
Yeah.
And I've tried. I mean, I've written an occasional thing here and there. But it's something that I think that, to your point, I've switched. I lost that outlet, and through the help of my therapist, with the help of my wife, who that woman has the grace of I can't even begin to express it, has allowed me to maybe be a little bit more forward about who I am and what I'm feeling.
So you don't need that other.
I don't need that other release, but it's the same time I feel sad because I liked writing.
Right.
So it's like a double-edged sword in that respect. That I love the fact that I'm more in touch with my feelings. I feel more comfortable being intimate and talking about those and trusting people with it. But at the same time, I kind of liked the feeling of, when I finished that hey, I wrote that, I put that away, and
So I will. So for me, like I'm much more forward than I was ever before. With this podcast, I've been for the past 6 or 7 days, I've been making a song every day and whatever, and it's just been a lot of fun. And I think at some point in my life recently, and it was like the midlife crisis or whatever, I kind of came to the realization that it was like a Captain Planet situation for me. Like, with our powers combined, we'll form Captain Planet.
Okay.
And it was.
I was really wondering where you're going with that one.
It was, I've got my work life, I've got my friend's life, I've got my family life, I've got, all these different pieces of myself that I never really brought as to one person and just be me all the way through.
Yep.
And so over the past year and a half or so, it's been a matter of, all right, this is just who I am and this is what I'll do and have fun with it. And going back to writing and stuff and figuring out, trying to find that artistic side of it again, I found that just playing with it, like turning it into a game for me, and starting off with like haikus, for example. I love haikus. We haven't done haiku in forever.
We have not done haiku.
but like, those are just, it's a game. It's like, all right, how do I do this? And I know that in the back of my head, like deep down in my soul or wherever, like there's that poetic side of me, and I can pull that out if I work to do that or whatever. And then when it comes down to like that subtlety stuff outside of haikus, like writing a song, for example, like putting down the lyrics or whatever, and like, all right, how am I gonna do this? Yeah, I could do it like this. All right, let's play with it for a little bit and just like make that a game. Like, that's my advice to you. If you want to try getting back into it, turn it into a game instead of turning it into like what it was before. Like, it used to be an outlet for you, like something that you needed to do. But if it's something that you want to get back to, like, play with it,
Well, it's kind of like this podcast for me. Like, just do it, and it doesn't matter what it comes out as.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, we get in front of this camera every week now. We've been doing it fairly consistently, and it's like, we don't know how it's going to go or what we're going to talk about. Yeah. You just do it, and it's more the act of doing it than it is necessarily the outcome that you have. And
wouldn't it be hilarious if we were not really doing a podcast at all?
But I don't think we need to. I mean, it's not like, let's look at you talked about our viewership stats last time. It was
78 as of today.
Oh, that's pretty good.
So we have 5 subscribers now.
But really, it's more about the connection of us getting together and just talking. And for me, a big part of it too was mentioned my issues, but I know a lot of that has helped me back from having connections with a lot of my friends from the past. And so for me, it's about connecting and just having a human connection with you and being able to talk about what we're doing. I think that's the same value you see in it as well. And so, but it's a lot more about the process than it is about what comes out of it. So it's the same thing with writing, like, and I say this as somebody who hasn't written anything in a long time, but like, it's just doing it, and whatever you come out with is what you got.
It's just for fun.
Right.
For funsies.
Even if it's,
So I wanted to mention, because it's funny perspectives in life in general, right? So we went to high school together, and
live by the brook, die by the brook.
Live by the brook, drink by the brook,
die by the brook.
Come on, man, get it right.
I'm sorry, I'm not from the brook.
River rat. But
we probably have our own river rats, unless Wessie has
ate them all.
Eaten them all. Yes.
Wessie's down on Brown Street. Check them out.
Yeah.
So one of like my first like poems of hiding things, but not really hiding things. I had written one in high school about you because I was so jealous of this guy.
There's a lot to be jealous about.
The thing was, like, the girls that I was interested in were interested in him. And so,
which is a really funny thing, because I've had, I think, 2 girlfriends in my entire life, and
that's funny.
So when you're, a teenage boy or whatever, that's a huge.
If only I knew my powers with the ladies.
Crushing all these souls. But I remember, and I wish I had it written down someplace. I probably do, buried someplace. But my poem was, "I wish my name was Finbar." Because that was, I don't know.
That was the name I liked back.
Yeah.
Finbar.
Yeah. And I can't remember what it was exactly, but it was just my jealousy about Pat the whole way through. And so when I hear you say you dealt with stuff, obviously you did. Obviously everybody did or whatever. But, back in now it's like, this guy's got it made. It's
I think that's interesting you say that, because I think it's generational. I think our generation was taught to believe we're the only ones experiencing this. We're the only ones having this issue. Everybody else's life is normal. It's great. Nobody else is having these traumas that we're having. And I feel like the current generations have learned to identify better with each other and realize everybody's going through some shit.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit different in how they approach it. They're a little bit more willing to be forgiving of one another than we were. It blows me away. And my oldest stepson is constantly on me. He's like, "You're a little too woke for me." But
wait, he says that to you?
He says that to me. I made his ass march in a pride parade this year, so he's always feeling a little bit. But when we look back on our high school days, did you have anybody that was out in your high school?
No. Well.
Not a lot.
No.
Very, very few, I would say.
I was gonna say there's one, but I don't think he was.
It was like you heard kind of rumors about it, or you kind of assumed, but it wasn't
there certainly weren't any couples.
There certainly weren't LGBTQ clubs and things like that, like there are now. Yeah.
But it's amazing to me. We went from a generation. There was something you mentioned in one of your last podcasts that you said that talking about LGBTQ rights and the non-discrimination, or basically when we were in college, somebody had talked to you and you had a discussion with them, and they were against any type of statutes or laws that prevented discrimination against them, because they felt like they had a right to decide who was going to rent an apartment. I think that was the example you used.
Oh, yeah.
And my DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion journey has been a long, long road from age 18, when I was a homophobe. Probably at some level, I'd consider myself a racist, but not
get the hell out of here.
I wasn't the waving a swastika or wearing a bed sheet racist. Somebody said it was in the South, racists are
Yeah, we talked
wolves.
about that
Yeah,
last
you
time,
did
yeah.
that, and in the North, they smile at you.
Yeah.
It's the difference. Malcolm X, I
Yeah.
think that's who you quoted, and
Paraphrased.
Okay, much better at paraphrasing than quoting. But I've looked on this because I've been working with a lot of people in my profession. I'm an ally. I started an allyship program at in my unit as far as trying to find ways to raise up voices of groups that have often had their voices minimized or their situations minimized. And I've really looked hard and long about my journey in that and how when I started out, I remember very distinctly as a freshman in college, there was something about wear jeans. It was for LGBTQ, and even back then it wasn't even called that, but it was you wore jeans that particular day, and I went out of my way to wear corduroys.
Yep.
Because I wasn't gonna.
You didn't want to be associated with that.
I didn't want to support that, and it was within months, years that all of a sudden we're living in a house where we're having a debate about admitting brothers that were open. They were out.
Yep.
And being on the opposite side saying, why aren't we letting these guys in? These are great guys. Like,
right.
And hearing some of the arguments. And now I'm to the opposite end where literally I've marched in 3 or 4 pride parades. I'm literally wearing a pride shirt and and I've talked about this a lot. My privilege really created a limited scope of understanding for me. I always looked at it as I was a poor kid. I came from a poor family. We were on the wrong side of the tracks. I was often, in my thoughts, discriminated against because I was poor. I looked a certain way. People treated me a certain way. And never once did I look at the fact that, shit, I was so fucking privileged. I mean, I had this conversation with, he's an older gentleman from the South. He's very adamant. I'm not racist. But I think privilege is bullshit.
Yeah.
And he kept talking about it. And I used the story from when I was 18. I was in a car that got pulled over for doing 95 in a 55. I wasn't driving. I was in the back seat. And we weren't doing anything. Like, literally, it was just the guy driving was a fucking idiot. And he was speeding. And I'm in the back seat with a girl. He's in the front seat with a girl. And I wasn't buckled. And I'm in a panic. And I'm trying to buckle my seatbelt. And this state trooper comes along after tailing us for what had to have been a mile going 95.
Yeah.
And he sees a kid in the back seat going and digging around. He drew his gun and started screaming, "Let me see your hands. Let me see your hands." And I remember very distinctly taking my hands very slowly going, "Oh my God, officer, I'm sorry. I was just unbuckling my seatbelt. I am so sorry." I'm putting my hands on the seat, petrified that I was going to get shot. And I told the guy, I'm like, I didn't get shot. That is a prime example of my privilege. I was a white Caucasian. Obviously that officer didn't see me as that much of a threat. He saw me as a threat. He recognized that here's this kid doing something shady, but I didn't get shot. That is privilege. That is the fact that every time I've gotten in trouble with the law, because I got in trouble a lot, you guys were there for some of it. I never got in any. I never had anything more than a civil infraction. I never got put in handcuffs. I never got any jail time. I never did any of those, and I was in trouble a lot.
Right.
That's privilege. I grew up poor, but I still went to college. That's privilege. Like, all those things have really reshaped my way of looking at things and what I can do for other people, because standing here, sitting here, looking at, man, I've got a really blessed life and I've come this far. How much of that was my doing and how much of it was people looking at me, looking at the color of my skin, listening to the way I talked, and giving me an opportunity because of it.
Right. Yeah.
So it's those things that have really had a huge impact, especially in the last few years for me. And I think you remember the text I sent to everybody, because
yes, I do.
I was
new phone. Who dis?
Andre, that really hit me. Like if that in that moment, in all the turmoil with Black Lives Matter and everything else that was going on, I used to justify the jokes that I would put your way, or any, like, it was, we always joked that we were family. We always made fun of each other. You guys made fun of me because I was a stoner, or that I was a slut, like whatever it was. Like, you guys, that was fair game. But those were choices.
Yeah.
I made those choices.
Yeah.
Who you are is not a choice. And it was one of those things that I was like, never again. Like, I'm never going to make one of those comments again. I am never going to take something that is not a choice and make it a joke.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And the last few years have been really about that. And my poor stepson, he's like, you're too fucking woke.
So, like, I'm far less woke than you. So let's go all the way back to that text that you sent. Like, my reaction to it was like, what the hell?
And to be honest, I have not seen this text.
Yeah.
So without going into detail, you don't have to recite it word for word, but what was the general sentiment of that text?
And I certainly appreciate the sentiment of it.
But what like, can we
It was
summarize
so
what it was
it
for
was-
anybody who's...
It was during the whole
It was
George Floyd thing.
Yeah, it was at the height of a lot of the protests and a lot of the Black Lives Matter movement and things like that.
Mhm.
And Colin Kaepernick, which, by the way, if you've ever seen his series, I recommend it. That was
Yeah.
one of the best
Yeah.
Netflix series I've ever
Didn't even
watched.
realize I wasn't.
But all I did was reach out, and I don't know what the cataclysm behind it. If somebody had said something, like, we were on a big group text.
Yeah.
And it was maybe Tommy P or Whitney or somebody had made a joke. And I wasn't chastising them, or it was me basically stepping up and saying, listen,
Yeah.
I have been one of the worst offenders. Like, I mean, Andre and I in college, we were tight. I mean, not nearly as tight as you two, but I mean, we were tight, had a lot of fun, did a lot of, I mean, he was a man who actually went for a Snickers bar once for me that literally took half the night and
Yeah.
several van rides.
That
Yes,
sounds
I've
like
met so
Andre.
many strangers.
But it essentially was, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to say that kind of stuff anymore.
Yeah, I'm like, we need to stop this.
Yeah.
It was basically a call to action from all of us because
we need to be better.
thank you.
Yeah.
That's actually one of our allies group. We can do better.
Right.
That's the motto.
Yeah.
So it sounds awful in me, but I don't care. Whatever, I do care. So I certainly appreciate that sentiment, and I appreciate the idea of doing better. And sure, we don't need to have jokes that are based on race, on sexual orientation, or anything like that. We don't need to have those things. There are certainly, I think, our group of friends, especially, yeah, that's right, I'm talking to you idiots out there. Our group of friends are intelligent enough to, like, enjoy ourselves, and we've had a great conversation this past hour and a half, 2 hours going on, it seems, probably, without, like, doing that thing. That's just proof right there. You don't need to do that.
Mm-hmm.
What bothers me about kind of, I don't know, maybe I'm talking myself out of it too. Like, you guys are turning me around, but, like, what bothers me is that, like, shaming people for intent, for non-intent, like, you're in the situations that you talk about, making jokes and stuff like that. From my perspective, it's there's no ill intent involved. So if you look at it in the context of things that are happening or whatever, like, those jokes come out, and out of context, somebody, like, listening in from out would be horrified. I shouldn't even say horrified, because they weren't even, like, that bad. Like, if they were that bad, obviously, not obviously from my talk now, but they wouldn't be a big thing. But I think to draw so much attention to it and make it a bigger thing than it potentially was. Like, I didn't really feel any sort of malice or anything from that. So when that kind of thing gets brought up again, to like revisit it and then, you know, make me feel, not like that was the intent of it, but like it makes me feel in that point like, oh, should I have felt bad about that? Like, am I a shitty person
Well, I mean,
because I didn't like step up or whatever? But the point is, like, I'm smart enough to know and recognize that like you were not like ill, like you didn't have malice in it. However, if somebody outside, somebody that I didn't know, for perhaps like had said something, or like made those same comments or jokes or whatever,
right.
then I'm going to perceive that as malice, and that's the whole thing. And so that's a part of humanity, I think, that needs to recognize like that natural, like, put things in context, but understand things.
And it's really complicated. Like, you have a personal relationship with these people, so you know there's a sort of a different back and forth where you can have those kind of jokes and know the intent and know the heart of the people that are saying them, and so it has a different feeling. We've also talked about how your experience being a Black person growing up in Westbrook, Maine, was certainly different than other Black people may have had, and so that sort of colored it. And I certainly don't want to get into that because I don't know all your personal experiences,
Mm-hmm.
but like that has probably shaped how you react to people making those kind of comments, especially when it's people that you know. But for me, it's also is that piece of what about somebody, and obviously those are personal comments being made within a small group, but like, what about those other people? Like, I remember, and I don't remember the specifics of it, but I remember there was a time that it really sticks out to me. We had they used to do like the Greek week, we do the performances and stuff. And I remember one time we went and we did those performances, and there was an issue where there were some people from our group of friends that were making some comments. I can't even remember what it was. I think it was making some homophobic kind of statements, and not intending it in a homophobic way, but like, right. I mean, we come from a time where saying, you know, slurs and stuff were like totally common. And I remember having a meeting where I stood up and I was like, dude, what the hell are you guys doing? And, you know, and people not seeing that it was that big a deal, but there are people that could have been hearing that and could have been part of that, where that would have been incredibly offensive. And there were even brothers in our fraternity that were not out at that time, where like, how are they feeling about those things? And if you're making those comments in a private place, what's to say you're not going to make those same jokes in a public, you know, like, so I guess, you know, that's all part of it, is like, you have to be better with what you're saying. And even if you're making those privately, it's still not an okay thing to do. And I don't know. So like,
again, I think that we can do better as people, and you.
I like how we're sitting here telling our black friend that it's not okay to make jokes that are racist.
Well, again, I'm far less woke than you. But the other, and I just wanted to point out the other thing, like, and I want to bring up that privilege thing, like your experience with the police officer, for example. I think there's another level of that, though. Like, it's not because you were white. I think it's because you live in Maine, and it's a different, like, it's a different.
But there are certainly places in Maine where it may not, in communities in Maine where it may not be as, especially now, because we're in a different time than when we were younger.
Exactly.
But
I mean, but I think that also has to be brought into play. Like, it is all in context. I mean, if the police here are operating on a different level than the police in Chicago, let's say.
Oh yeah.
And whether that be and I don't want to take away the dangers of being a police officer anywhere, but
I certainly could not.
But those dangers are certainly different in different places, and you're going to be at your baseline a lot different. Like, I would imagine that somebody pulling somebody over in the streets of Chicago
is fucking terrified about what's going to happen to them as they're doing that. Absolutely.
I'll be really honest. So, and I don't want to, Mark, if you ever watch this, I'm not speaking on your behalf. I'm just relaying what we've talked about. So Paula's ex-husband is a cop. He's worked primarily as shift lead third shift. So he's seen the drunks, the domestics, like he's seen it top to bottom. And he also, I was at his house the other day. He has, you know, at Christmas where you see the paper rings that are connected. He has one of those, and it's every week he has left before he can retire. Because he's almost up on his 20. He's a former Marine. Like, he was a corrections officer, and he went into law enforcement. And he is probably the most non-police officer that you'll ever meet. In fact, Mark, I'm gonna let this out. He was called White Bread or something, like a Wonder Boy. Like he is the most honorable, law-abiding person I've ever met. Like, he gives me shit about the fact I speed horribly, and every time we've like had to go someplace, he's followed right behind me.
Hold on a second. You're saying that he's the most not police officer because he follows the laws?
Something like that. He's not. He doesn't make an exception for himself.
Okay.
He holds himself to everything that he puts out there, and he holds, like, because where he is a corporal, he's a leader. He holds the people that he's accountable for to those same rules.
Yeah.
Right.
And he has by far the hardest job. And Paul and I, one of our favorite things is to watch true crime. She never got to enjoy that with Mark because that was what his job was.
Right.
Yeah. He couldn't do that.
Yeah.
I am extremely woke. I am extremely liberal, but I'm also Second Amendment. I'm not currently carrying. It's one of the rare times that I don't have a concealed firearm on me. But that's one of those things that all my Second Amendment friends look at me like, you're a fucking woke liberal, and all my woke liberal friends look at me like you're one of those weird Second Amendments. But he never could conceal carry because he could never find the right time to turn it off.
Yeah.
He was always being a cop. He was never being Mark. He was never able to turn that constant vigilance that he had off because of it. And I'll tell you right now, I've got a lot of friends that were in law enforcement, former family members that were in law enforcement. There is not the ones that do it right, the ones that are in it for the right reason, they have the hardest jobs in front of them. There are plenty out there that are in it for the wrong reasons. I mean, similar to what you have to deal with. Teachers, grossly underpaid. Law enforcement, grossly underpaid. And they're literally, I mean, first responders, like, they don't have an easy job. So, like, there are times where I look at my paycheck. We're talking imposter. I feel bad about my salary because I consider my job, yes, it is, my brain is mush at the end of the day. It is trying. I have to make some pretty big decisions. But at the same time, I don't feel like I'm really putting myself. I'm putting that professional person on the line, but I'm not putting myself.
Personal self on the line.
Whereas teachers, law enforcement, first responders, soldiers, you are putting yourself out there every single day. And that's you lose a little bit of yourself every day with that. And so I said what I said when I said it because I felt we could do better. I never wanted anything I said to ever, like, you walk away from that and think about it years from now and say, I wonder if Bubba was saying that and he really felt something differently. Because dude, I know I gave you a ton of shit. And a lot of it, there were some undertones of that. And it was never about your race. It was never about your color. It was never about who you were. It was the fact that you were Dre, and I don't want to get you in trouble, but we had a lot of fun in college. And we had fun together. And we went out and we were brothers. And same for you, Pat. It's funny now looking at, first of all, I don't know if you guys are, I'm sure you are friends with Matt Moore on Facebook.
No. I mean, yes, I am.
I'm just now getting into Facebook.
Unfortunately, yes.
Matt and I always seemed to be on opposite ends, polar ends of whatever debate was going on.
Yeah.
You guys are like right in line if you're woke.
Oh, nowadays,
Matt's done a bit of a turn on some of his. Not that he was like a bad guy or anything, but like
okay, I feel bad like putting this public. Matt Moore, I
love you, Matt.
I remember Matt Moore once telling me that Ronald Reagan was the greatest president ever. And if you've seen Matt Moore's current Facebook feed, you would never guess. And it's a beautiful thing. I'm just saying.
But it's funny because now I'm seeing so much that he's posting and putting up there that I'm like, he actually turned me on to a book, How Fascism Works.
Yeah.
And I loved it. That was a great book. I'm actually in the middle of the Indigenous Peoples History of the United States, which is an amazing one. And when you guys were talking about women's suffrage, recommend Invisible Women.
Yeah.
And it's basically a book about how most of the world doesn't account for women in their design and the metrics. It's why Alexa only responds to men's voices and not women's. Yeah. So if your wives have ever complained about Alexa doesn't hear me or understand me,
my wife will totally connect to that because Alexa never, like, literally cannot understand her.
Tell her to lower the octave of her voice and it will work.
She's gonna talk more bass. Yeah.
It's so much like OSHA standards.
Yeah.
All of the rules for OSHA are based on a 5'10", 180-pound man. So you wonder about, the rules for chemicals and like building and everything else. They're all based on men. Infrastructure, roadways.
What's the name of this book again?
Invisible Women.
Seriously, at 4:30 every morning is Andrew being like, Alexa, stop. Alexa, stop. Alexa, and me finally rolling over and being like, Alexa, shut the fuck up. And then she shuts
off.
Yeah.
But that was actually a book I traded with him because he had turned me on to How Fascism Works. So I sent that his way.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how somebody that he and I always never seemed to be on the same page back then. And now everything he's posting, I'm like, oh, I'm resharing that. Like, I love it.
Well, I think he's somebody that at the core is a great person who appreciates other people and has some of those good social values, but then was more conservative in his upbringing and his beliefs, and then it took so that that's what it is. But like,
and you know what's sad is like looking back on it in this is going to be our 20th class reunion. 20 years ago, we were definitely, and sorry for the use of the term woke again, but we were probably one of the most woke groups out of the rest of the Greek life that was out there.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about it.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, because
you don't think that other your roommates?
I was just about to mention that. Yeah,
you were not allowed to join. I think it may have been not quite as.
I mean, because you think about it, we had Asian, we had.
Openly gay.
All I'm thinking about is Kermit. It's one of my.
I was gonna say. I mean,
really?
First of all, you can't like go acting like we had a ton of all of these.
No.
But
we had more
one Asian. There was
we had more
one
than that.
black person, me, and another black person, and a gay person.
No, we had three openly gay.
At the time.
So we were amazing. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, when we came in.
Oh, when we came in.
Okay. No, but since while we were there.
Oh, okay. By the time of graduation.
Listen. You're
not that we're like, woo! Yeah, three people that were openly gay.
Your pledge class was my gift to Beta. I recruited you.
That was your retribution.
Yeah, exactly. But like at the time, we were definitely more, I guess, open than most of the other groups. And it's still like, it amazes me how little we actually knew even then, or how much we were willing to accept of other people.
Well, and even then, I remember having conversations with people with like, what if we let in these, guys who are, or like, what are people going to think of us if we have these people put as part of our group? There were definitely members of our group that worried about that, but then there were a lot of people that
I'll never forget the first time we looked to give a bid to an openly gay man. the actual debate was, we're going to have to shower with this person. And I remember, I know who said it. I remember very distinctly. And I remember just thinking to myself, so what?
Yeah.
Like, do you think...
Mosquito on your face.
It wasn't me.
Damn you, Andre!
But I remember thinking to myself, like, are you kidding? Like, that's... But it's nice to at least feel like... Because I've talked to a lot of people that came from Greek life at other schools, or even the University of Maine, and, like, we were kind of ahead of the curve as far as who we were, what we were trying to do, who we were as, a brotherhood.
I tell you what, like, one of the things I love, I don't know what the brotherhood's like now, active, but at the time when I lived there in the house with 25 other dudes or whatever, it was so diverse. And, like, that's what I loved about it, because I could talk to all these different people with different backgrounds, and it literally was like different people, like, and to have those conversations. And I feel like having that experience, like, prepared me for life, because when you're in life, you're going to interact with different people, and you're going to have different perspectives on things. And if you're in a, let's just say, a fraternity, if you're in a fraternity that is all the same people, if you got all jobs,
homogeny,
if you got, and that's what they're looking for, then once you get out of that, you're lost almost sometimes if you're not in that experience.
It's really interesting. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but, like, when people bring up that I was part of a fraternity, there is a part of me that feels really self-conscious about that, because there is probably a really well-deserved stigma that goes along with that.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that our group of guys was perfect in any way. I mean, I just talked about how there was an example of that time where people were making some comments that I felt were totally out of play, and, not to pat myself on the back. It's just an example of a time where we weren't doing the right thing. And I can certainly think of others, but I also do think that we had, for the most part, a really good group of people. And I think I really benefited from that. And I feel like that stereotype was not fairly applied to who we were as a group, and that I grew a lot as being part of that group. And so, like, that was, just kind of going back to what you were saying, it was a diverse group, a lot of people that were pretty progressive in their thinking and at the time. And, I really appreciate it. And I always feel a little conflicted about that when it comes up in conversation.
Yeah. You're absolutely right, because you almost feel like you have to defend it. You're
exactly.
Like, I belong to a fraternity, not a frat. That's kind of one of the expressions that I said. We had minimum GPAs. We had required philanthropy hours. We had bonding. Like, it's
I think we worked hard to try to do it to the best way that we could at the time, and again, it wasn't perfect. And I can certainly see when there are different issues that come up, or people like, there are some huge concerns with fraternities and what goes on with that. But I'm very thankful for my experience with that, and I feel like I benefited a lot from it.
The one thing that I always throw to people just to show them how different we were, I'm like, when we had parties, we were all required to be sober.
Yeah.
And the look on their faces like, what? I'm like, that was how we made our money. We'd have a party, we'd make that money so that we could do something for ourselves. Yeah. Like, parties were not about recruitment. They weren't about anything other than we put on entertainment and we made some money doing it.
Hold on a second. You're kind of a lawyer, right? What's the statutes of limitations?
Oh, they're all passed. They're all passed. Don't worry.
Anyway,
10 years.
I think one of the things you talked about earlier too that really was important for me was you were saying that how, and we've kind of gone all, which is our typical thing, gone all over the place, but you were talking about your own how you've talked about going to therapy and how it's really important for you almost overshare it, and you're like putting it out there. And that really resonated with me, because I think with all of these things, whether it's about talking about our own mental health, talking about kind of being woke and our realization of some of the things I used to do and say, like, I've really had some realizations about that. though, like expressing that to me, like expressing that to others, especially my kids, is so important to me. You've talked about how one of your big things is you want to do things like this and you're journaling and stuff to like leave something for your kids and be really honest with who you are, and for better and worse, but like let your kids really know who you are. For me, that's super important as well. Like my family has a history of dealing with mental health stuff, and I dealt with that stuff a lot throughout my years. And so like I want to be so honest with my kids about that and about the mistakes I made or about the struggles with mental health I had. And so it's really important to me to be really honest. And I haven't totally sat down and told my kids like, hey, here's our history with our family, and here's the things, this is how it affected your grandparents, this is how it affected your aunt, this is how it affected me. But I absolutely, like, I think about that all the time. Like, I'm going to have those conversations with my kids, and I'm going to do it when they're teenagers, not when they're, 40 years old, like with me. And like, so I think, again, we're from that generation where there's been this huge transition. I think it's I think we're very fortunate, and I think our kids are going to benefit so much from it. But again, that's why I think what we're doing right now is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Even if it's only 76 people listening to it, but like the fact that we're willing to sit down and have these kind of conversations with each other is so awesome. And I think it's cool that we're at this place where we can do that.
Definitely.
So,
I mean, I believe that the children are the future, and so
you teach them well.
I think that's key.
That used to be back in the AIM days. That was always one of my things. Like that, and like in the immortal words of Trick Daddy.
Yeah,
Trick Love the Kids.
Yeah. So what was your screen name? It was
probably Finnegan 1420.
Yeah, Finnegan 1420. What were
Finnegan 80, I think, back in the day, but then it became Finnegan 1420 after I joined Beta.
Yeah, I didn't have an AIM name.
You didn't have a name?
I didn't. I wasn't. I remember. I'm still like. I know that you were class of what, 98 in high school?
Yeah. You were 99?
97.
Or 97, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
1 year before us.
But I didn't do anything with computers. Like literally there was a gap from like 97 until like they put a computer up in the loft for me so that I could, or up in the RAM so that I could do some schoolwork.
It is funny. That age is like really weird. Like my wife is 3 years older than me, and the generation gap between us when it comes to technology, music, like movies is like huge. It's really a weird time.
Were you born in 79 or 80?
I was 80. She was 77.
Yeah, I'm 78. The 70s, there's
a huge difference.
Yeah,
it's really funny.
My Paul is 77 as well, and she's actually a year and a day older than me. So our birthdays are, hers is 25th, mine's the 26th of October. But like I didn't have AIM. Yeah. I left high school before it really became a thing, and then when I was in college, I didn't really have. I'd have to go to the library for a computer. I didn't have a computer, so there was a big kind of gap there.
I didn't have it in high school. I had it in college.
Yeah, in high school I was still like, dialing up, and then my parents could use the phone. I barely had it.
I remember the first time I ever heard of an internet connection without dial-up. It was when Josiah and my brother were living together in Brewer, and they had a cable hookup, and I'm like, so how do you dial up? And they were like, you don't. I'm like, what? But that's I never had an AI, although I still have my original Hotmail email account, which is Beta Dragon 1406.
It's so funny when sometimes, because I get all the parent email, and every once in a while I'll see a Hotmail, it'll be like, I've got how you still have a Hotmail? Seriously?
Andre Davis 5 at hotmail.com. I'm trying to wean off of it. It's kind of turned into my junk.
That's exactly what I use it for.
You need one of those, right? So,
that
makes sense.
I actually talked about that with somebody. I'm like, you should have like a family email, you should have a business email, and you should have a junk email where all your junk stuff goes.
Yeah.
Funny.
I had Mexico 1421 was my
Mexico?
Yeah.
That's right. I
Is that
forgot.
because
Everybody called you that.
You're a chameleon.
I can't remember what event it was.
That
It was like
started-
with some sorority, and it might have been like 2 Lies and a Truth or something like that. And it was like, oh yeah, you're Mexican. No, I'm not Mexican.
You remember so our freshman year, there was a young a lady that we met that I think you met at like a project or like remember you went up before school started?
Yeah.
Project Bound, was that what it was?
Yeah.
Do you remember? Do you know who I'm
Yeah,
talking about?
I
We
do.
did a music video with
Sounds
her.
like a
She had the
BDSM.
pelvic
I know
thrust
what you're
from
about
around
to
the
talk
world.
about.
So yeah, I remember sitting there one time and she was talking about how she could recognize Jewish people just by looking at them.
Shut the fuck
And I was like,
up.
oh yes, okay, so am I Jewish? She's like, yeah, oh, you're Jewish. So it's because my nose is big or something. I'm like,
I was gonna bring that
The
up.
most
earlier.
Irish last name you could ask for.
Exactly.
Yeah,
You know
I was
my last name?
but that's actually kind of an awakening for me because I didn't have very many like experiences with people that would like
Yeah.
say shit like that, and I was just kind of like, oh, okay, I'm at college now. And
Yeah.
people
By the
say
way,
different things.
Paula may be actually watching this because she just sent me this.
Is she the
This is on my living room wall.
is she the one that makes all the comments every little ding? It's like her.
Maybe that's what it is.
Oh.
We're getting hits, guys. I did want to ask. So, what do you think I can get for this fine piece of art?
Yeah, $1.
$1,000?
$1.
I'll give him $2 for it.
See,
Yeah.
you are
Oh.
awful at this negotiation game.
Well, that's what I would pay for it is $1. I actually I have to share this. This is really funny. So I'm at my youngest had her kindergarten boot camp last week, and I'm listening to the whole spiel. And mind you, my oldest has already been through the school for a year, so I knew most of the stuff. And at the end of it, Paul and I were like, well, let's go up to the parent-teacher group, introduce ourselves, because they meet Wednesdays. Wednesday's one of our nights that we have open. Maybe we can join and see what they need. Plus, Paula's got all this experience teaching, and be good for her for snap all like. So we get up, start talking, and the woman behind the table looks at me and goes, you look very familiar. Like, are you from the Dover area? And I'm like, no. I'm like, I lived here for a few years.
Was she a big Rocky Horror Picture Show fan?
No.
Okay,
she went
good. I
to.
didn't want to ruin the story.
No. She
That's
went
right,
to. She went to UMaine.
Oh.
And well, because I go, so yeah, I'm from Brewer, but I went to UMaine. And she looks at me and she goes, like, eyes got like big, and I go Beta Theta Pi, and she starts nodding, and she goes, Vinny, and I'm like, yep. She goes, I was the one who had the thing with Heskett for a while. She was somebody that was on the same swim team as Vinny in high school and came up after he was already in the house and like ended up having a whole fling with Heskett for a while.
I thought we were going to talk about the Husson crew.
No, I know all of them still. Thank you. No, I'm still friends with Heather, and I know that whole pocket. But yeah, so like literally, she's like, I think we did a case race together one time. I'm like, as these kids are walking around us.
Hey.
I got a couple good off-camera
Okay.
stories, by the way. So,
Oops, I
that
forgot
reminds me
we're
of
off.
just like those weird connections to things, but not ones I can share on the podcast.
There was somebody I saw in line at a Walmart once down here, and she looked very familiar. How can I describe her that you would recognize? Okay. Never mind.
That's
I'm never-
suitable. This is another off-camera.
This is another
off-camera
off-
story.
I've got another off camera for you.
No, I had I was like,
This is where we
is
shut off the
this
camera
that
and turn off the
person?
By the way, if you guys are doing this in another couple weeks, Paula has something for the catechist. So if you want me back for another week,
Oh, for sure.
Oh,
in
yeah.
2 weeks.
Sure. This has been the longest podcast yet.
Yeah, we're hitting 3 hours at this point.
Oh,
so we
Jesus,
might
your
wanna
poor
wrap up.
listeners.
Yeah, we're gonna wrap this one.
Yeah.
No haiku again,
Yeah.
but But yeah, it's been great. Thank you so much for coming down.
Thank you for having me. It's
Yeah.
been great.
Anytime.
All right. Yeah,
All right.
absolutely. So next time we will either have Prince or maybe we'll have Corey back.
Yeah, yeah. And again, if you are a medium
Who
and
can help us connect with Prince.
Yeah, we would love
we
to
appreciate
hear
that
from you.
greatly.
$milliondollarfist.com.
Vintage circus antiques and collectibles.
Yeah, I got nothing.
All right.
All right.
Talk to you later. Oh shit, this is gonna be me stepping through this and scrolling down to end stream.
Yeah.
Now
We
we're-
have no
well,
comments. So that wasn't
okay,
it.
we're now done.